just need something to do while waiting for 15 minutes. Yep. I think somebody has their hands up. Hot Wheels. All right. Yep. Damn it. I'm gonna restart my computer. Be back in a minute. Testing. All right. Share screen. Share system audio. Testing. All right, let's go to like. Testing.
All right. Oh, we can hear it.
Can you guys make noise? Because I want to see if I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I think so. My sound wasn't working on my streaming setup for the desktop audio.
I think Otangela's mic might be broken.
Can you bring Heisenberg up?
Inviting them up right now.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you guys?
Just getting prepared. We're starting in 7 minutes, so we won't be taking the topic right now until after the show starts. But what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just I don't know if this would be considered on topic or not. But just like I think that I had a question about how is everybody defining God for the topic, because some people I think some people are saying it's on the theist to define God, but I think like if I was to say I am God compared to an ant, it might be kind of a different conversation, you know? So it's I kind of wonder what the non-deists are accepting as the definition of God for the purposes of the topic. Is
Usually
Yeah,
it's the most stereotypical definition of God used around the world. So a non-physical mind that created the universe, typically.
right. So it's not like people just work with any definition of God that they want. Like there's a certain, like you would probably draw the line at some point, I would think, right?
Right.
Like,
so you couldn't just say God is this potato that I'm holding in my hand, therefore God exists. That would be
right.
very, very silly.
Right. Okay. That was all that I was really wondering.
So yes, typically the words that are used in the title are meant to represent the most typical definitions that those words have in the dictionary.
Yeah, because I'm a theist, but I don't know if I would define God as being non-physical. But yeah, I think I would have a workable definition that can be discussed. Yeah. So what happens to me is people start asking like probing questions, like, "What about this? What about that?" Like the omni attributes and stuff. I'm like, I don't really think the omni attributes are particularly coherent.
Yeah, those aren't
But
required for
but
God.
I
Like
try to.
most religions
Yeah,
don't
people try
have
to
those.
box me in though.
So like what properties do you think a God has?
I think he has mind. Probably the most obvious property. I would tend to think that God is non-biological.
Okay, so this is actually kind of the topic that would be more appropriate for the show. So I think
Right.
we
Okay.
will get that onto the live stream. So let's hold off on these ideas now. Just keep in mind
Yeah.
that we're welcoming people presenting a goddess or god or a combination of multiple deities.
Yep. That was my question. Thank you for answering it.
You're welcome. And usually we do generally try to accommodate what the definition is that people presenting the idea uses, because that goes hand in hand with the claim, obviously.
Right.
All right, so we got everybody's bios and discords pinned right now that's in here. So if anybody hasn't been to their YouTubes, make sure you go to their YouTubes and you follow them or subscribe, because they're awesome. TJump, Randolph, and Jail, they all rock. So follow or subscribe to them all.
Yeah, we're going to be starting in 2 minutes. We've got people waiting in the YouTube channel as well. 9 people waiting.
Should we move Otangelo and Heisenberg back down to the audience initially?
Oh, yes,
That might
definitely.
be fine.
All right, we'll be pulling y'all back up. Go ahead and re-raise your hands whenever you like.
We'll be starting in 1 minute. Muting my tabs so it doesn't make noise when I'm talking.
Morning, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Will it let you start the stage, or does it show it started?
Yeah, we need to start the stage, I guess.
Give it a drink.
Hey, welcome everybody. We've just started here on June the 26th, 2022. We're a panel of people who are mostly atheists, who are responding to people from the audience who would like to convince us that a goddess or a god exists or multiple deities exist. We're just going to start with some introductions and then take questions and challenges from our audience. Thank you everybody for being here. The people who are on the panel include TJump or TJump, an atheist philosopher who hosts conversations with professors, philosophers, and other academics about topics ranging from biology and physics to religion and morality, and so on. J. Mike is one of the co-hosts of the Talk Heathen show. Jefferson Spatchcock is an atheist inquisitor and intellectual who has particular expertise in analyzing and reviewing debates. J.L. Warren, an atheist activist, educator, and entertainer. He runs the Bridge the Divide YouTube channel, where he addresses irrational beliefs and irrational behaviors that often follow, the societal divides they create, and how those divides can be bridged with education, rationality, and reason. I'm Randolph Richardson. I'm an atheist from British Columbia, and I'm the founding president of the Canadian Atheists. I'm an advocate for freedom, fair justice, and critical thinking. Let's see. The IX is a Tom Unboxes subscriber and former atheist community of Discord admin who enjoys long walks through evolutionary, biology-inspired computer science, archaeological, academic, biblical criticism, and so on. Jack Burton is a self-described middle-aged, college-educated nobody who drives the Pork Chop Express truck in his spare time. He's a deist and mostly non-committal to philosophical stances. Peter de Tucker is an atheist from the Netherlands who handles the production of various YouTube channels, including Aaron Ra's channel, and generously contributes his professional artistic skills for free to atheists all around the world. King Xerxes is an atheist activist and political commentator who has extensive knowledge of the Holy Bible and history surrounding it. And Taco, the organizer of this fortnightly program, is a #1 Discord debater who has never lost a Discord debate in his life. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. The links to everybody's channels and social media can be found in the description of the YouTube video that we're live streaming. We can get right into this because I see that there are some people here. I'm just going to let Taco take it over, and if anybody else had anything they want to say. And before we begin, I just want to give a shout out to the Better Conference, which is going live this weekend, and it is hosted by the Atheist Network Group, also known as TANG. They are avid listeners of this program, and so hello to Jenna and Oz, and thank you very much for tuning in and promoting this program, as well as the idea that atheism is normal. Go ahead, Taco.
Yes, we pulled in Otangelo. We'll go ahead and get started. If his mic works.
What's up, Otangelo? What you got for us today?
Let's move on to our next guest.
Perfect.
Okay.
Raid, I invited you.
Greetings, Banshee, for hanging out with us.
Hey, yeah, it's great being here. Such an honor. You know, when I saw this, it was very perplexing because I think this is such a great discussion topic. What is God, or does God exist? Because all of this is bundled into one topic, right? And I want to make the point that God does exist, but not in the way that people think. I personally think that God is a paradox because everything has to come from something. And my definition of God would mean that there is a creator that created everything from scratch, right? That the creator is what made everything happen and everything exist, and all of the universes and everything just, come into reality. But the thing is that most people just, use against this idea is that the creator must exist somehow, right? So my idea is that because God cannot really create itself, because whatever created God must be created by something else. And there's no such thing as nothingness, because nothingness does not exist. It's not true. It's not real. And that is why I believe that God is a paradox.
So, Ray,
So,
if God is a
paradox.
Well, I just want to get a clarification on what Ray was talking about here. Because you think that essentially God created the universe, that God created everything. Everything that exists is the universe. God created the universe, right?
Well, he created the first steps of the universe, right? He didn't really create everything. Of course, everything took time. I believe in evolution, right? He didn't really create the amoeba that became a monkey, and then that monkey became something else, right?
He
Okay,
got
so
the whole process started.
So you're putting God as kind of like the initiator of the expansion event we call the Big Bang.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
Okay.
But I'm just kind of curious. If God initiated this, then God would have had to have created the environment, or the essentially God would have had to create the
void,
beginning point, the beginning point that would be the expansion point, the expansion event. So if there was only God, if there was only God and nothing else, and then God did this, what did God make that initial starting point out of?
Well, I believe that he created everything from you know, the the quartz of the atom, and then he formed the atom. What I'm trying to say is that not exactly what it was originally made of. Because essentially what it was just a bunch of concentrated matter colliding on itself
But who
until it
cr-
became a big explosion.
Yeah, but who created that matter, that initial matter? Who created that?
Well, for that, I don't know. Nobody knows. But that whatever created it, because nothing can create by itself, is God, right? And as I was stating before, God cannot really create itself. So God is a paradox.
Okay, so but is in your definition, is God eternal or infinite?
I would say God is infinite. Yes.
Okay, so if God was always there before anything else, and now see the way I'm looking at it is very simple. There was God, and there was nothing else. God was the only thing, and then there was God, and there was other stuff, and God created that other stuff. So there was God and nothing, and then there was God
Mhm.
and something, and that
Yes.
something came from God. Okay, so what did God create the matter out of?
Now, now that's the reason I said that God was a paradox, is that you can't really explain it, right? The paradox is kind of like everyone knows what the actual meaning of a paradox is, but the only way to define God for what it is a paradox, right? It's
Okay,
something that
so
yes.
how do you reckon? I mean, like, do you just like accept it? Is that what it is? Because in this particular
Well,
state,
I think we don't have enough. We're not scientifically involved to actually prove the existence is right now at the moment. But when we do, we're gonna find out really quickly that everything will lead to a paradox.
okay,
Everything will
so
lead.
wait, so how does this how is this different? How is this any different from a God of the gaps argument? Because you're basically putting God into the gap of what we don't know, and just calling God
Well,
a paradox because that's all you can break it down
well,
to. Essentially, it's still
well,
God of the gaps.
if you show a caveman, a piece of fire, right? He's probably not gonna know what that is.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. What you're doing, the how you've created your position, what you've created your position, how you're defining everything, and where you're placing everything, is just you're sticking God into the gap of knowledge we have about the states of the universe before the expansion event that created that essentially is the origin of our observable universe now. So yes, there are questions we can't answer yet. You are correct. There's information we don't have. And if you look at things like, the halting problem or Gödel's incompleteness theorem, there is potentially information or knowledge that we will never have because it's literally beyond our reach and always will be. So essentially, there's a gap in our information, and you're putting God in that gap in order to explain a phenomena that doesn't currently have a 100% explanation. So how is that any different than a God of the gaps fallacy?
Well, can you really explain a paradox? Like
I don't
to
need to
its
explain it.
existence.
I don't accept that it exists. I don't need to explain it. All I need to say is what information do I have? What evidence do I have? And what conclusions can I draw from that with intellectual honesty? And if I don't know something, I simply say I don't know, or we don't know, but we may eventually, but we may not. But I'm not going to stick an answer into a slot just because it makes me feel better, just so I can say, oh, there's an answer there. Because
Well,
that's intellectually dishonest.
I didn't create this idea out of nowhere. I didn't create it because I wanted to make myself happy in a sense, right? I created this because
Then why did you accept it?
Wait, what is
I
the
accepted
idea?
that God is a paradox.
Well, no, I don't care
There's
about.
a fundamental point that I want to get to once he's done with Jail Warren.
Yeah, I just want to
Yeah.
get it. I can pass it to Randolph here in just a second. I'm just like looking. It's like,
Yeah,
why
but-
accept the God? We've broken it down. It's a God of the gaps argument. Why accept this? Why not simply say we don't know?
Let me ask you something. Do you know what created because this is also going to go in the gap. You don't really know what created the Big Bang, the big expansion,
Nothing created.
right?
Nothing created the Big Bang. The Big
You
Bang.
believe in nothingness.
The expansion of no, I don't. The expand. Nothing. Something cannot come from nothing. That is a logical
Yes,
contradiction.
exactly.
Okay? So, okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean the thing that was there or is always there is God. There's no evidence to support that conclusion. So what you're doing is fallacious, and I'm curious as to why you settled on that. That's all I want to know. Is
On the paradox?
we determined that your argument is a God of the gaps, and you seem fine with that.
Wait, I still
I'm
have no
curious as to
idea
why.
what his argument is. So, like, why do we need a god? Why couldn't the universe have just always
That
existed?
we're getting there, dude. It's
Well-
a raid. I want to know. I want to know.
Well, I just want to
You
start with this.
re-
Why? I don't understand what he said. Why do we need a god? Why couldn't the universe have not been created?
It doesn't matter. We're looking at his personal position. Okay, and I'm saying he needs to be able to reconcile the fallacy in his personal position before he starts going on trying to explain it in a different way. And that's what's important.
He didn't make a
Raid,
god of the
is-
gaps. What he said wasn't a god of the gaps. He didn't say we therefore God. He just said things need to
Yes,
be
he
created.
did. That's exactly what he said.
No, he didn't.
I said that God was a paradox. That's what I said.
That's true.
Right.
That's how you started. But we broke it down to expose that this is basically God of the gaps fallacy.
I don't see
The
any
thing
god of
is-
gaps in what he said. So could you just restate your argument? Why do we need a
Yep.
god? Why couldn't the universe and natural stuff just have not been created?
Hear anything? 1 second.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, you're saying that God is a paradox. A paradox is a self-contradiction, or an absurd statement that's self-contradictory. If you're saying that God is a paradox, then how do you argue for God's existence with this paradox? And I agree with you that it's paradox. Like, you've got the Christian God, for example, has omniscience and omnipotence, and I've pointed out numerous times in the past, but maybe you're not familiar with it, which is fine. If a God is both omniscient and omnipotent, two of the many characteristics of the Christian God and the Islamic God and many others, then they don't work well together, because if you're God and you know that tomorrow I'm going to have sunny weather in my neighborhood, tomorrow rolls along and you use your omnipotence to change the weather to snow or rain, you've now invalidated your omniscience from the day before. Therein lies the paradox. But I guess you have a different idea on what you mean by God as a paradox. Perhaps you could elaborate on that.
Do you guys know about the grandfather paradox? I've read it in many books, but I think a lot of people don't exactly know, the what the grandfather paradox is, right?
Time travel.
Time travel, exactly. You kill your grandfather, and then you travel back. But how do you exist? How do you exist to actually kill your grandfather if he never created you, right? So that is a paradox.
Yeah.
It's something you can't really explain.
We don't travel back in time though, so.
Not yet. But
I get that if we invent time travel, we're going to have that problem to deal with. But
Hang on. Just a sec. You said not yet.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that be in past tense?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you try to answer my question? Because I'm still like, none of what anyone has said has meant anything to me. What is the reason we need a god?
What is the reason we need a god?
Why do we wait,
there's no reason.
Stop. Why does there need to be a thing who created all of the other things? Why can't the universe be uncreated? Why can't it be the god and you don't need a mind?
Well, I'm not saying it does need a mind. I'm saying that nothing can't come from nothing. Nothingness does not exist. Nothingness
we
is
agree.
something.
We agree nothingness doesn't exist, but I'm a naturalist. So I think that like quantum fields are the fundamental thing. They created all other things. They don't have a mind. There's no God. It's just nature. Where is the problem there?
Well, if you define God as nature, if nature is what created nature, then I agree. That's God. But the reality is that something needs to be created by something, and that has to be created by something, and that has to
Not
be created by
created.
something.
It was never created. So there was just nature. It was never created. No creation. It's just always been there. No creation.
How can something always be there? That's the thing.
You argue that for God, that's your position with God, that it was always there.
I never said it was always there. I said it was a paradox. Well, true. Something that's infinite is always expanding. What do you mean?
You agree that God is always there, that God is infinite, that at one point there was God and nothing else.
And then what created that thing? I agree that God is a paradox, right? And I agree that God is infinite because there's always going to be something creating, right?
No, why? Why would you always need something? Why can't there just be a thing that's always been there?
Well, I can't really explain that to you. I said it in simple terms. It's a paradox, right? There's always going to be something creating that thing,
No.
right? Well,
Like a paradox,
then
as Randolph said, is a contradiction. There's no
it
contradiction
is a
in
contradiction.
wait. There's no contradiction in a thing that has always existed. There's no contradiction there.
It's not a paradox.
can-
It's just special pleading. That's it.
That's the
No.
thing I can't really believe in because honestly, how is it that it's always been there? So the atoms that collided on each other and made a big explosion to create the universe, it's always been there?
But
Yes,
you're
the quantum
advocating for
fields.
something that has always been there. So why is it strange to believe while you're advocating for it?
I didn't understand that at all.
Arrayed. Essentially, what TJump is asking you, it could be nature, or it could be this mind thing that you call God. Why does it have to be? Why does it know? It's either one or the other. Why does it have to be God?
Why does it have to be God? Because
Yeah.
it created everything, essentially.
But why? Yeah, okay, but we see natural processes creating things all the time. Why can't it just be natural process? No mind, no agency, no purpose. It just does it.
I never said that God had a mind. It could have a mind. I don't know, right? Nobody knows, right? And that could totally fall into the gap that you call not explainable, right? What I'm trying to state is that God is the paradox. I'm not trying to state that he's some kind of like humanoid beard dude who created everything. What I'm trying to essentially say is that God is a creator. He is what created everything from the very point.
Okay, so Arrayed, that implies a mind. Like, I'm not sure if you heard yourself, but you said, I never said that he had a mind. You said, I never said God had a mind. And then you said he, and then you said is a creator, etc., right? So it's like, you don't seem to be clear on what the implications are of what you're saying and the fact that it implies and requires a mind. And you don't seem to...
Well, there's a lot of things that don't require a mind.
Well, being
Like
a he, a person who is a creator, implies a mind. That's what we mean by those words, right?
So do you know what a...
Let me finish, okay? So what TJump is saying to you is that, you can have quantum fields that are the explanation for the existence of things. In other words, if we look in our best physical theories, we have something like QFT theories that may or may not involve dark matter, may or may not involve, certain versions of the Big Bang, etc., may or may not have, space-time as an emergent. There's all these different theories. But what they all have in common is they all agree that there's these QFTs that seem to be the explanation for the existence of all the things. That the things are, if you describe them properly, manifestations of these fields, right? Now, none of that involves the field being a he or needing to be the creator. It is just the thing which grounds and explains the existence of the manifestations in it, right? It's like if I have a piece of graph paper and I draw a picture on the graph paper, the picture is grounded in the fact that there's a graph paper to draw it on, right? But we don't say the graph paper created the drawing. It's just that a graph allows for there to be points on it. It's like conceptual almost in the case of the graph paper, right? So there's no point in the explanation of the graph paper where we need to invoke that, well, for there to be a drawing of any kind, has to be a person. Just because I can imagine drawing on the graph paper is great, and I could say, oh, well, someone must have drawn the things on the graph paper on purpose. It could also just be an ink blot, right? The graph paper could just have holes in it. Like, there's all kinds of things that can happen in some medium or some substrate that do not require a conscious entity that is a he. Now, when you say it's a contradiction.
He was just a way to describe what it is. I know that I was giving it a human term, right? To thing and making it so it has some kind of mind or whatever. I said that by accident, okay? Now that I'm listening, right? I now understand what you're trying to say. But I didn't mean it that way. right?
Okay.
I was just saying he to refer to it as a thing, but of course that is
Maybe,
not how you refer to something as a thing.
Raid, maybe I have a better question. So everything
Go.
that TJump has put forward, for that there is evidence. Why are you putting something forward for which there is no evidence whatsoever?
How is there no evidence?
What evidence do you
Can-
have for this
Well,
eternal creator that exists and that creates
can
things? What
can
evidence
something
do you have?
can something just exist out of nowhere?
Okay,
That's what
I
I'm trying
asked
to say.
I
That
asked
nothing
you
can.
I asked you a specific question. Please
Yes,
address
and
the
you're asking for
question.
evidence, and
Yes.
I'm telling you the evidence that nothing can come
No,
from
no,
nothing.
you're not telling me the evidence. You're asking me a question which implies the need for your God. That doesn't help. What is the evidence for your God?
I just told you, nothing can come from nothing.
We don't claim
That's
that,
Great,
Arraid.
great.
Arraid,
That
Arraid.
still
None-
doesn't get us
Arraid,
to
none of
your.
us-
That still
Yeah.
doesn't get
Wait, I
us
think-
to your God.
I think what
It
he's
does
arguing.
get us
One sec.
to a question
One sec.
that we haven't answered yet.
I think
but
you're
it
missing
doesn't
his
get
point.
us
I think
to
you're
your God.
misunderstanding what he's arguing. So I think he's arguing that there must be a past infinite regression of events, and that there can't be one event that is past eternal. So I think by creation, I think he just means events, and there has to be a past eternal segment of events, and it's not possible for there to be a necessary thing. There just must be a past eternal thing of events. I think that's what he's arguing. Is that right, Araid?
I agree. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. It's a paradox. It's just lines of contradiction, above contradictions, and everything like that.
And what evidence do you have to fill that paradox with
I just
your
told you,
specific?
nothing can come from nothing.
Well,
I
there's
just told you.
two things there.
That is a thing that you put forward. What evidence do you have to fill that position with what you call God?
Okay, sure. If I light a match and that match creates a fire, boom, I created something. Because the chemical reactions and the
There's
reaction
evidence.
it had with
There's
the air.
evidence you exist. There's evidence you exist. There's evidence matches
I
exist.
can give you billions
what
billions of
evidence?
examples.
What you can give me examples. What you can't give me is evidence.
Evidence.
for
I
the
gave
thing.
you evidence. I gave you
Let
evidence.
me-
Nothing can
let
come
me
from
let
nothing.
me finish. Let me finish my sentence. You give me examples of existing things for which we have evidence that they exist. What evidence do you have that what you call God exists?
Wait,
Not examples, not questions that need to be answered.
It's not a question.
Oh my god. So
Okay,
wait,
what's
wait,
the evidence?
wait. All he's saying is that causation must have a past infinite regression. That's all he doesn't say there's a mind. So he's not talking about God in any way that we know in the word. All he's saying is that there must be a past infinite regression of events. And the concept that nothing can come from nothing is pretty well accepted in philosophy. We grant that there's no such thing as a philosophical nothing. So that's fine. We can grant that. But two things. An infinite regression isn't a paradox. It's not a contradiction. There's no logical contradiction in an infinite past regression of events. That's perfectly fine. The problem is when you say that it must be that way. There's also no contradiction with a necessary thing that exists outside of space-time that created space-time, like a quantum field. There's no contradiction in that either. So when you assume that there must be a past infinite regression of events, that is not the case. There are other alternatives, like a necessary field that exists outside of space-time and created all the stuff we see around us. So it's not the case that it requires a past infinite regression. And it's really weird that you're calling a past infinite regression God. That doesn't make any sense. And it seems, again, that you're not really advocating for anything like what we would normally call a God. You're just saying there's a past infinite regression, and you're arguing for that over a necessary kind of entity.
I'm saying a paradox is
It's not.
God.
There's no paradox in any of that.
Well, that's something that, for some reason, you don't really understand what I was saying earlier. I was saying that, because I already know what points you're going to do, because I'm just getting what I have said earlier again, that something has to create something and that has to create that. And at the end of the day, there's this infinite loop of whatever
we've already been
created
over that.
thing.
You do not need an infinite loop. I've already proven this wrong.
Exactly.
You can have a necessary being. There's a determination. There's
Well-
this one thing that created all other things, and that one thing always exists, never created. This is a thing in physics. We know the two
It
alternatives here.
always exists.
Yes.
It always exists.
Yes.
How so?
It exists outside of space-time and created space-time. Space and time are emergent from quantum fields.
Well, that I do agree with that statement, but I still believe that that at the very point of all of this, all of these laws and physics and everything, something had to define it. All right, something had to create matter to actually.
And what evidence do you have for that particular something?
He's never given any particular something. He's just talking about nature. He hasn't said it's a god of any kind. So that's why I wanted to go on. Like, I think we should move on. Well, he hasn't.
Your question, I have responded so many times. It's nothing can come from nothing.
I think we should move on to the next speaker because he's not talking about God.
Wait, yeah, okay. Here's the thing.
Blue can be red. Blue can be red, but that doesn't answer my question. My question is, you have a well-defined concept of what you think is God. My question is, he thinks he
what
does.
Evidence do I have? All right, so here's the thing.
What evidence do you have for this?
We're going to go into dead end. Right?
Let me finish my question so you can answer my question instead of something completely different. Your well-defined concept of God, what evidence do you have for that? And don't come at me with, well, you can't answer this, therefore I am right, because that is all you're doing so far.
I'm not asking you a question. I'm just telling you that nothing can come from nothing. That is clear evidence.
We all know that nothing can.
Okay.
We all know that is the case.
Peter, he's not talking about God. He's literally not talking about God. He's talking about
guys, bring somebody else in here. Bring somebody else in here. We're going to go into dead end. We keep talking about this.
This is why I asked him to present some evidence for his well-defined concept that he calls God, which isn't God, his well-defined concept. And he can't do that.
I'm with you. So Otangelo wants to discuss abiogenesis with TJump. Apparently they had a conversation about this 2 years ago. It sounded very interesting. It sounds like Otangelo has evidence. Otangelo, your turn.
Ooh.
Yes, hi guys. We had a debate about theism against atheism, and TJump. He tried to refute my argument of abiogenesis,
and successfully did it.
Yeah, and I think that in your regards, I would like to have 2 minutes without being interrupted to just give a more adequate answer than I gave in that debate. Is that okay? Can I be not interrupted for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to lay something down here, Otangelo. If people are interrupting during your opening statement, is to ask for clarification on a term or something, okay?
Okay, so Tom said in that debate, RNA polymerization on clay has explained the problem of RNA polymerization. And applying inductive reasoning, we can generalize and so say that naturalism explains the origin of life better than creationism, which provides no explanation. And I would like to reply in a more clarifying manner now. Using inductive reasoning fails in the attempt to explain the origin of life because several different fields are involved and various different problems require an explanation. The science paper in 2020 clarified investigating the origin of life requires an integrated and multidisciplinary approach, including but not limited to biochemistry, microbiology, biophysics, geology, astrobiology, mathematical modeling, and astronomy. So what's quite challenging is that life is such a collection of different things that work in an integrated fashion so well together, not just different components, but life is based on chemistry and information. The origin of both are entirely different issues, different separate behaviors and different accomplishments like self-replication, information transfer, or whether its forming compartmentalization or modularity contribute to the overall accomplishment of the cell. One could break and divide the cell systems into different separate functional parts and various different things. Attempting to explain the origin of the enclosed cell membrane is entirely different than explaining the origin of carbon and nitrogen fixation upon which the origin of the basic building blocks like amino acids, RNA, and DNA depends. Which
Wait,
again,
that's fine. Wait.
Also, I'm finishing, just one sentence still. Again, is also a different issue. We can move on to the quest of the origin of polymerization of RNA, DNA, and amino acids, and the origin of instructional assembly formation, the genetic code, and the origin of energy production, etc. So there are very
okay. That's
big
multiple
standing
sentences.
leaps.
So most of what you said is completely irrelevant. So the argument here is, I agree, there are thousands of different, completely different areas that are required to explain the origin of a cell. Totally agree with you. And one aspect like the RNA polymerization is just one of like thousands and thousands of different things that we all need to explain to be able to explain the origin of life. The reason we can use induction to infer that naturalism is a better explanation is because it can explain a number of these, like the RNA polymerization thing. Because the naturalist hypothesis can predict and got these predictions correct and explains a number of these steps, let's say, I don't know, 5% of the steps to create life. That model is better than a model that provides 0% of the steps, which is your model. Your model explains 0% of the steps. Naturalism explains 5% of the steps. And so the better hypothesis here is the naturalist hypothesis because it was successfully able to predict these things prior to knowing them and got it right. Whereas your model has made 0 predictions about the origin of life and gotten none of those correct. And so our model is better. That's the argument. That's why we're using induction, is because any kinds of things, any of the 1,000 steps, if we can explain them and get them correct with novel predictions, is evidence of our model. And the one that gets the most correct is the one that has the most evidence. And that is the naturalist abiogenesis hypothesis. It's the only one that has evidence.
Yeah, so I refute what you're claiming, TJump, by doing an argument from analogy. And that is that...
Otangelo, I apologize. Quick interruption. Randolph, sound is gone on your stream.
Yeah, I'm just looking into that now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Otangelo.
Okay.
Yeah,
My apologies. Go ahead, Otangelo.
Yeah, so my reply to that, Tom, is that we know by repeated experience that the origin of blueprints containing instructional complex assembly information dictating the fabrication of complex machines, robotic production lines, computers, transistors, turbines, energy plants, and interlinked factories based on these instructions, which produce goods for specific purposes, are both always explained by intelligence. We know by our own experience as human intelligent beings that we are able to construct these things. And analogously, we see the same state of affairs in a cell where information directs the making and operation of complex machines and production lines.
So that's a hypothesis. So what you can say is that in our past experience, when we see things that look like blueprints, those are made by humans. Therefore, you can infer that you think that cells look like blueprints, and therefore you think that they're also designed by some kind of a mind. That's fine as a hypothesis, but that's not evidence the hypothesis is true. In order to come up with evidence, you would then have to use that hypothesis to make predictions about the 1,000 or 10,000 steps of how we get to life, how we get to a living cell, and you'd have to be able to successfully make predictions using your model that you think it's designed about those 1,000 steps. You've never done that. Just simply looking at the past and saying complicated things require blueprints and blueprints are made by minds. That's a fine way to make a hypothesis, but it's not evidence of the hypothesis. Now, we also came up with a hypothesis. We said that oh, look, natural processes in the world pretty much made everything, and minds never have been successfully shown to do anything in nature. We're going to think it's a natural hypothesis. And if it's a natural hypothesis, we're going to go that extra step. We're going to make predictions and say, oh, the RNA synthase can be explained in this way of these different kinds of things that occur in nature. We can make predictions and say, we'll find these in these certain circumstances. And then we do tests and we confirm the predictions. Oh, we were right. Now that's evidence. So you start with the hypothesis. We both have a hypothesis, but ours goes one further, uses that hypothesis to make predictions about what we're going to find in those 1,000 steps and gets them right. Yours doesn't do that. You just have the hypothesis.
Well, the problem with that is that we are talking here about single events which supposedly happened in the past. And if what you are saying is true, then we should actually be able to observe in nature molecules in the trajectory to become life, and we don't observe that.
Well, we only need to observe the things we predict. So if I predict RNA is going to form on clay or RNA is going to form corpuscles on clay, and it happens, that's evidence of my model. So I don't need to make predictions about entire collections of the 1,000 steps. I only need to make a prediction about one of the steps and get that one thing right. And if I get that one thing right, no matter how tiny it is, that's still more evidence than your model because you have 0 things right. So you have to start with your hypothesis. And then once you have that hypothesis, yours is that it looks like a blueprint, so it must have been made by a mind. Then you need to use that hypothesis to make predictions about new things we don't know yet. And if we discover those to be correct, then you have evidence. But you haven't done that. The natural hypothesis has done that.
Well, the problem is, TJump, that what you are claiming is basically not true. Abiogenesis is a failed hypothesis, and in every field, it doesn't provide the confirmation of the predictions. And there is another problem. Even let's suppose that science could come up with a trajectory to go from prebiotic making of the basic building blocks. How do you go from that state of affairs to the very complex biosynthesis state of affairs in cells, which is a huge gap, and it has not even been tackled?
I don't think you're understanding the problem here, Antangelo. So assume we both have models and we both have 1,000 things we don't know. And this is the 1,000 things that are required to create life. Now, each individual step is going to be really, really tiny. We haven't solved the whole thing. You can always say, oh, look, there's 900 things you haven't solved, and be like, yeah, you're right. We haven't solved those 900 things, but I did solve this one. And this one is more than what you solved. And so if I solve one thing and your model solves 0 things, my model is better than your model. So the fact that the abiogenesis model has made many, many successful predictions which have been confirmed, and you can just go to the New Scientist, First Life, the search for the first replicator, and just go through a list of all the different academic papers that have been published where we have found these, where these were predicted and discovered by the naturalist hypothesis. Just give you one example from Nature, volume 459, page 239.
So
there's sugars and bases were found as a prediction of he took a half a sugar and a half a base and stuck them together, forming a critical sugar base that linked everything and struggled, and then created a self-replicating RNA molecule. And this was predicted that they would find this. So I have now solved one of the 1,000 steps. You have solved 0 of the 1,000 steps. My model is better than your model.
Well, you have already several problems here. And the first is the sugar molecule, ribose, which you need to stick to the base. You don't have a prebiotic trajectory to get carbon fixed. Yes, it matters.
Well, no. Again, Antangelo. Wait. You're skipping things. So I don't need to go in order of the steps. I can start at step 347. So I don't need to explain how I got from step 1 to step 347. If I can predict how step 347 went to step 348 and I get it right, that's evidence of my model. So I've solved one problem right in the middle of the steps. There's assume there's 1,000 steps and you have to go in order to get a living cell. And I only predict step 347 and 348, and I have no idea how we got from step 1 to step 348. It doesn't matter because I made a successful prediction, which is evidence of my model, of that one step. and yours has 0 of those successful predictions. So my model is a better model.
Well, the problem is that you don't have that success which you constantly claim, because we know that the bases and ribose, they hydrolyze in water. They are, rather than joined, they are separated. That is an
That's irrelevant.
unreachable problem.
Like those are other steps.
Claim.
No. You're saying in order to get to step 347, there's these other steps that you can't explain. Those other steps don't matter on Tangelo. I made a prediction that if I do this thing, I will get this result. I did the thing, I got the result. That's evidence. It doesn't matter if you think you're going to need some other steps to get to those first initial boundary conditions. It's irrelevant. I made a prediction that if I start with these conditions, which I started with, and I made these conditions and put them together manually with my intelligent designed mind. I set up the experiment, said if I set up the experiment with these conditions, and we will expect to see this result. We did the experiment, we got the result. That's evidence of my model. Whether or not you think it's possible to get those conditions in nature is just irrelevant.
Well, I have addressed precisely your claim that it is possible prebiotically to stick a ribose.
I did not say that.
Base.
Again, I didn't say prebiotically. I don't care.
Okay, so what is it precisely which you said, which you claimed was successfully predicted and then confirmed?
So, like, just to give another example, corpuscles can form on clay. That's an example. And this can happen. I don't care about the prebiotic material. I do not care at all about prebiotic Earth. I don't care at all about how life formed on Earth. Makes no difference. I don't care about the first 300 steps. Completely irrelevant. All I need to do is predict one step successfully. If this step can occur in nature by my hypothesis, I have evidence and you don't, because you haven't predicted that. You have predicted 0 steps. I have predicted 1 step. My model is better than your model. Complaining that there are other steps I haven't predicted is irrelevant.
Again, what is that thing on clay which you just claimed?
Corpuscles forming on clay. This doesn't matter on Tangelo. Like if you're just ignorant of the basic research, then that's your problem. There are tons and tons of predictions made by abiogenesis research. I gave you an article that lists them. You aren't allowed to disagree with these. These are published academic papers. They have discovered what they claimed to discover. The only thing you can argue is that, oh, well, in order to get those basic starting boundary conditions of those experiments, they must not have done these other steps, which they're irrelevant to the study. They don't care. So you don't get to object to these studies. They exist. They proved what they exactly claimed to prove. And then the fact that you don't think they can happen on the prebiotic Earth doesn't matter. These are evidence.
Well, give me whatever thing you think that has been successful.
I gave you an article that lists it, all of those things, and you can't refute them.
I just want one, and then we'll see if I can refute it or not.
No. You can't refute it. They're published academic papers. You don't get to refute it. Because they've literally and empirically demonstrated in a lab. You don't get to say, oh, it can't be done. It was literally done in a lab. This thing was occurred.
Just a point of interest. Sorry, just a point about these papers. If you do want to refute those papers, the way to do it is to write papers of your own and get them peer reviewed. Science is definitely open to that.
Yes, they absolutely would be. That'd be the best thing, is to do the work. Open up a lab, do the work yourself, break it down, show how their paper is wrong, and then update. And then you get out there, get peer reviewed, and then they'll be like, oh, wow, Tangelo has proven that this was false. It's proven that that there was something wrong here, and we have new, better information.
Yeah, my initial point stands, Jump. You didn't refute it. Just by claiming that science has solved one problem, that therefore abiogenesis is better explained by natural mechanisms, is something which I not accept. I think that's not the right way to go, because there are very different problems which have to be solved. And I would say if you cannot solve just one of the many problems, then your hypothesis is not confirmed. While we know that intelligence can do all the things which I just explained analogously, we do all these things, we construct them, we make blueprints, and upon them we construct machines and factories and turbines and so forth. So analogously, we can apply that and say, okay, if intelligence is able to do it, then that means yes, intelligence is able to do it. And what we see in the cell is far more complex and more elaborate and complex to make than whatever we do. So we can infer that a much higher and more sophisticated intelligence had to be involved to create life.
So I already addressed that.
Otangelo,
Simply
can I
saying,
ask you a question?
one second, I'm just giving my
Ask you.
concluding remarks.
Okay.
Just simply saying that it's possible that intelligence could do it isn't evidence. That's a hypothesis. That's like saying it's possible magical pixie farting leprechauns could do it. Is that evidence of magical pixie farting leprechauns? No. So in order for it to be evidence, you have to take that hypothesis that you think it's possible X could do it, and then make predictions about the thing you're discussing to be able to discover something we don't know about it yet. So simply the fact that this X could explain it is a hypothesis. It's not evidence. The evidence is when you say this could explain it, and here's how, here's the natural processes that we can predict we will see under these experiments. And if you get that right, there's evidence. And only one model has done that, and it's not yours.
I would just like to add one point from our YouTube audience. Mark Reed has pointed out an aspect of how science does not work. He's saying if you can't find an answer, it is not automatically falsified.
Well, I use two methods. Can I answer that? I use two methods. One is when abiogenesis research only leads to dead ends and doesn't provide any reasonable explanation whatsoever. And we know in parallel that intelligence is actually a capable mechanism. Then we have 2 points which we can join together to come to a conclusion. One is abductive reasoning to the best explanation. Intelligence is the best explanation for the things we see in the cell. And eliminative induction, that means we have checked, we have made predictions, they have not been confirmed, therefore the bag is empty. Okay, intelligence is a better hypothesis.
Tangela,
Can I ask you a question about...
Tangela, you're going to rival Theranos for the false claims you make. Come on, dude.
I'm sorry. I just want to know one of the predictions
Hold on. I had a question for Otangelo. I let TJump finish, and then everyone else jumped in. So I'd like to ask my question to Otangelo. Maybe this will help. Otangelo, your claim has always been that DNA is analogous to a blueprint for a factory. Am I correct?
No, the DNA, Peter, is a semantophoretic molecule. It can be compared analogously to a hard disk, and it stores instructional assembly information using a genetic code. And it codes for proteins, for all the parts which are made in the cell. There is more information in epigenetic systems, but let's leave that aside right now.
That is new to me. That I've never heard you claim that. So can you run by me again the analogy that you use, the blueprint for a factory? Where does that one come in?
I can quick read it for you, okay? Just give me a
minute. No. Just in your own words. Don't read the entire blog. Just in your own words.
Yeah. So what we observe in the cell is that instructional assembly information stored in DNA through the genetic code directs the making and operation of molecular machines, assembly lines, turbines, and the entire chemical factory, which is the cell.
Okay. So when you say that God created this particular blueprint, and that is a claim that you've made several times, even when you came here. So let's say that, let's run with that. So God made a blueprint. If that analogy is correct, then the blueprint leads us to factories, leads us to factory workers, leads us to power plants that power the factory, leads us to subcontractors that provide additional materials that aren't made in the factory itself. So where are God's factories? Where are God's factory workers? Who are the subcontractors? Where's everything coming from?
You know, the amazing thing, Peter, is that what we see in the cell is a fully 100% pre-programmed
you have no answer.
Robotic.
You have no answer to my question.
I am answering your question. If you permit me to finish, you will understand what I am saying.
Okay, go ahead.
So these factory workers that you are talking about, they are substituted by an entirely self-sufficient, pre-programmed robotic factory where all operations, they are working and operating in an
Where do the
autonomous
robots come from?
fashion.
Where do the
God
robots
create-
come from?
God created them.
God created them. Where?
Well, the robots are the molecular machines, which are the proteins.
No. I asked where.
Well,
Where
here-
did God
here-
create them?
Well, here on Earth, of course,
With what?
with the matter which he had on hand.
God had matter?
Yes, the elements, the atoms, the matter, the materials.
So what you're saying that matter is eternal?
Oh, he created matter.
Oh, he created matter. Where
Right.
did he create that?
I don't know.
So
You're
how
here,
do you
right?
know?
So
How do you?
created
Okay,
it here.
if you don't know
Our
where, so
universe.
how do you know? No. Quick question. If you don't know where he created it, how do you know that he did create it?
Well, do I need to know where he created it in order to know that he did create it? Aren't we here, Peter? So this universe exists. It is
That's
here.
not an
That we are here is
explanation.
that we are here is the question. My question is: you make claims about God that you can't back up. So you don't know where he created it. Okay, I'll grant you that you don't have to know. So how did he create? How did he create it? So what did he create? He created the matter that we see today from the matter that he had, and the matter that he had, he also created. What did he use to create that matter?
Yeah, matter is energy, Peter. So I believe that God had potential matter at his disposition, which he actualized.
Where did he get that from?
It was always there. That potential to.
So there is matter that God
instantiate
didn't
potential.
create. This is great. We're getting now. Finally, we're getting somewhere. So there's matter that God didn't create.
No, there is potential matter that God instantiated and actualized.
He said that there's energy that God didn't create. That the energy was always there, and then God manipulated the energy into matter, and then used that matter to create life.
Oh my God, Angelo, are you a pantheist?
No.
We're listening. We're listening
JL.
in real time for Otangelo to go back into an infinite regress of materials that God used to create. And this is amazing.
Let me correct JL. I didn't say what you rephrased. What I said is that I believe that God had potential energy at his disposal, which he actualized.
Okay,
and where did this potential energy come from?
We need a breakdown. Hang on, Peter. We need a breakdown of that. God had potential energy at his disposal.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if God is there, and potential energy doesn't just come from nowhere. So it's either always there alongside God, or God created it and then used it. Which one is it?
Yeah. The potential of actualized energy was always there at God's disposal.
So you're basically stating that something existed alongside God eternally.
Yes. This is amazing. Someone needs to clip this.
It was not actualized. It became to start operating when God actually did wind up the universe at the singularity and injected the energy.
Yeah, but it had to be there in the first place.
Exactly.
Energy and potential matter is eternal. Energy and potential matter is eternal. Just like God. And the only difference between you and physicists is that you agree on one point. The one point you don't agree on, for that there is no evidence, which would be your God. This is truly amazing that you actually agree with current science.
Well, Peter, don't straw-manning me as you usually do. Okay, so I didn't.
If I'm wrong, correct me. I don't want to straw-man you. I don't want to straw-man you.
I didn't say that actualized energy was eternally there. What I said is that God had potential energy at his disposal, which he was able to will and actualize, which he did at the Big Bang.
Okay, so
And
where,
where
who
and the
created,
energy.
who created the
no,
potential
let me
energy?
hold GL.
Yeah, that's it.
Let me try get clarification. So this energy is eternal, correct?
Again, you are not listening or not understanding or trying
I'm
to
listening. I'm
strawmanning
trying
these
to. I'm
people.
trying. I said I want to clarify this. The potential energy that God had to create things out of is eternal. Am I correct?
Let me give you here
Not
an
a statement.
example.
It's a question.
Yeah, let me give you an
No.
example.
No,
Can I
not
give
an
you
example. This is a simple yes or no question.
the
Was it eternal or wasn't it?
the potential, the ability of God to instantiate and to actualize energy
I'm not talking about
was
his
always
ability.
there.
I'm not talking about his ability. I'm talking about the energy that you claimed God had at his disposal. Is that eternal?
I said potential energy, Peter. I didn't say
Otangelo,
I
hang
said
on,
potential
Peter,
energy.
No, you
hang on a
didn't.
second, Peter.
No, wait,
Stop,
JL, I'm getting
stop.
somewhere.
No,
JL,
Peter,
please.
Peter, you guys are going in circles.
Otangelo, I'm
it's very,
asking you about the
Otangelo,
thing
it's very,
you
very
claimed.
simple. Stop.
You said God had potential energy at his disposal. That is your claim. My
Right.
only question is this potential energy that you claim that God had at his disposal. I'm not putting anything else into this. The thing you claimed he had at his disposal. Is that eternal, yes or no? That's a yes or no question. We don't need examples. We
He
only
said
need
God
a yes or
actualized
no.
it.
The answer is yes.
Let
It's
him answer.
the answer
Let
is
him
yes.
answer.
Wait.
I want to hear
Peter,
his
you're asking
answer.
a stupid question.
No,
Peter,
no
you're asking a stupid
TJump. I
question.
want to hear
Stop.
Otangelo
You're-
answer. And there's a
You
reason
aren't
I want to
understanding,
do
Peter.
that.
You are misunderstanding. God is infinitely
Which
powerful.
is why
stop,
I'm
stop,
which is
stop, stop,
which
Peter,
is why
stop,
I'm
Peter, stop.
asking
Holy shit. Peter,
clarifying
stop.
questions
Peter, stop.
to
You're asking stupid questions.
Otangelo, not
Stop.
to any of you. I'm asking
Peter,
Otangelo. So
he
please,
answered your
Otangelo's
question.
the guest.
Please shut up.
Let him answer.
So his answer is yes.
Okay,
God is all
I'll
powerful.
shut up.
God is all powerful.
Yeah.
He has
That's
infinite energy.
great.
God has the energy.
It's great that you now gave an answer that isn't coming from Otangelo, which means absolute fuck all to me.
Okay,
Thank
come
you,
on.
TJump.
Yes, Peter, I
I'm
agree
asking
with
Otangelo,
TJump.
how hard is it to let
He just said he
Otangelo talk?
agrees
He's
with
the guest.
TJump, Peter. Shut up.
Again, I agree with TJump.
So this energy is eternal.
Again, you're strawmanning me, Peter. Stop.
I'm asking you. I'm not. This is a question.
answered
How
it.
is
He's
a
answered
question strawmanning?
You don't understand.
I want
it.
to
He
be.
answered
I
it.
want you, Otangelo, to be specific.
Ugh.
The energy that you propose that God had at its disposal, is that eternal? That is a question. It's not a straw man. It's a question.
It was not eternal, Peter. I was pretty clear.
Where did it come from?
I don't know.
Where did it come?
I don't know.
You don't know.
No.
So how can you say that he had it at his disposal if you did not know where it came
Peter,
from?
he said he actualized it, which I think would mean somehow he created it. So that's the answer he gave a little while back, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he's essentially saying that he meant that he said Otangelo is basically saying that God magicked the potential energy that he could manipulate then.
Exactly.
Because
And
in
that is
Otangelo's
what I wanted to
worldview,
point out.
Otangelo's worldview, chemistry does not explain life, magic explains life. That's pretty much what it is.
That is what I wanted to expose, JL.
Yes, that's what I was
Otangelo
trying
makes
to
a
get there
baseless.
before
Makes a baseless claim, and I wanted Otangelo to confirm that, not anyone on this panel. My apologies if I aggravated any of you. I wanted Otangelo to confirm that he doesn't know, and that he just made up shit out of thin air as an explanation, which validates the whole thing that TJump and him started out on with this, because TJump came up with things for which there are evidence. TJump told Otangelo several times, what you have is not based in evidence. It is a baseless claim. And we still are here listening to that particular baseless claim. Otangelo, can you go do your research and come up with evidence
Can I reply?
for this claim?
Can I reply?
Yes,
Stop.
please.
I would like to reply. Okay, the analogy which I want to make is this. Let's suppose you need to have a blueprint to make a machine. That blueprint doesn't exist. But if you sit to the drawing table, you have the potential through your mind to actualize that blueprint. You can put it on paper. So we have a state of affairs first where there was no blueprint, and then there is your mind, which can conceptualize a machine and can put a blueprint on paper, which gives the precise dimensions, which then can be used to build that blueprint, and then you put it on the paper, and then you actualize what you have in your mind. The same I see with energy, which was not actualized beyond the physical universe, and God had in his power the ability to actualize energy and then to trigger the Big Bang. So if you think that I am bullshitting people, that my hypothesis is not sound, provide a better explanation from where the energy came from, which triggered the Big Bang, and we talk.
We don't have to, because you set the stage for that. You don't need the source of that particular energy in order to make a claim. So we can go by your standard and just tell you that unless you come up with something that has more and better evidence than the current model, then we can discard your model based on your standard, Otangelo.
Yeah, what is your model?
Didn't TJump point out necessary fields earlier?
Yes. TJump
where
went
did they
over
come
that
from?
with you 2 years ago. He went over that with you just a few minutes ago. So don't keep asking to have people repeat something, because that would equate people to you, because that's literally all you do. You never come up with a new thing.
I've never got an answer to where the quantum field comes from. And by the way, the quantum field is physical, it is in time.
We don't know, which is a perfectly good answer according to you, and the only reason that we should be thinking of a different way where it came from is for you to come up and debunk it, which is what you just asked us to do with your model. When you got to when you got to the point, I don't know.
I don't have to debunk, I don't know. You already confessed you have no explanation, no answer whatsoever.
You confessed you have no explanation. You said, I don't know. You said you don't know
word. God.
Which is a nonsensical explanation.
Well, I don't care about your opinion, Peter.
It's not your
opinion.
No, it's not that you say it's God. It's no. Your claim was that God had source material, and when we asked you where that came from, you said, "I don't know."
No, I didn't claim that. Now you're strawmanning me again.
People can go back.
He had potential energy at his disposition. I didn't
Which
say
is source material, Otangelo. How silly are you going to be?
No, it's not, Peter. I didn't say that energy is eternal. I didn't say that.
I said it is source material.
We've already been through this. Otangelo just means that it's a part of God's nature. That's all he means.
Yes.
So TJump, do you have an explanation where your quantum field came from?
It's uncreated, just like you think God was uncreated.
So it has always existed?
Yes.
Okay, so explain to me how it is possible that it transformed itself into the four fundamental forces which are just right to permit the making of atoms.
It didn't transform itself.
Well, what happened then? Was it always a quantum field? Then we wouldn't be here, right? Some transformation had to occur in order to...
They're emergent properties. So the four fundamental forces are emergent properties from fluctuations in the quantum fields.
Well, emergent property isn't the mechanism, TJump.
Well, the mechanism is the fluctuations in the quantum fields.
What happened, that it emerged, but what made it transform from that quantum
fluctuations in the quantum field produced these things.
Okay, so again, my question again. You can have basically an unlimited number of forces which could have been frozen, because you know that the four fundamental forces, they are stable. We can make predictions. We are here. That is not a
Tangelo,
given.
this is
You
no
need to
longer
explain that.
abiogenesis. Are we changing the topic now?
Peter changed the topic.
Okay, I think perhaps we should move on here because we've taken quite a lot of time and there are other people in the audience. Maybe give Otangelo a final 30 seconds to kind of say what he wanted to say and we'll move on. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Perfect.
Okay, I appreciate. I think it was pretty civilized today. It wasn't interrupted too much, so keep on doing it that way. That will provide much funner debates amongst each of us. And I stand to my initial point that just explaining one thing in regards of abiogenesis isn't by far sufficient to say, okay, abiogenesis is plausible.
Thank you, Otangelo. Appreciate your time, and it's we went way off topic. TJump, did you have anything you wanted to summarize about this? Because it sounded like you had something to say.
I guess I could respond to his last point about the fine tuning. Why did the quantum field form into the four fundamental forces as we see today? That's because it's in its nature to do so. Just kind of like how he says it's in God's nature to want to create a life-permitting universe. Well, it's in the quantum field's nature to create the four fundamental forces as they're designed. And that would be an equivalent answer for both.
Thank you. Peter, did you have something you wanted to finalize with, or JL Warren? I know you guys both were interacting with him quite a bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that Otangelo's position is exactly the same as ours, and I wanted to at least have a chance at demonstrating that he ends exactly where science ends, and the only thing he does then is that God did it, and for that particular claim, he has no evidence, will never have any evidence, won't even attempt to find evidence, which to me just shows the dishonesty. Because he will, if you go there, he will automatically derail the conversation to a different topic, as he did today.
The conversation ended as soon as he appealed to magic or appealed to divinity. The minute you appeal to heaven, it's over, because
Yes,
it's just like, yeah, that's when the conversation should have ended with Otangelo. Because I mean, if he can't say simply intellectually honestly that we don't know, and he just says God magicked it, appeal to magic, then the conversation is over. It's intellectually dishonest, it's fallacious, and Otangelo knows this. It's been explained to him a number of times, and he doesn't seem to be able to. There's a fundamental flaw that he somehow he can't accept it. So. But I mean, yeah, if it comes to that and the conversation is going in a direction where it's just appeal to magic, it's over. It's done. So that's it.
I just wonder if Jack Burton, IX Taco, or Jefferson Spatchcock had anything to say. Good to see you here, Jefferson.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey,
Welcome.
Jeff.
I thought TJump did a really good job of not getting derailed, and when you talk to somebody where they're going to change the subject as they want to do, well, what about this? What about that? The initial point is that the whole worldview has to make predictions that are novel and testable in a way that gives it some credence. And if the alternative credence is just like an analogy or a speculation or an assertion that, well, this could have done it with no evidence, that was it, right? Now, I think what we're trying to do when we take things a little further, even if there's nothing convincing about what's been presented, is we're not simply saying, like, that's not convincing. We're saying, do you not see why this isn't convincing? And we're trying to help maybe members of the audience who think the way that that person does, or the person who's still making the argument, to try to get them to acknowledge why it's not convincing. But you don't really have to do that. If you have someone going on and on about what about this and what about that and what about this, and like changing the subject all over the place, you can just kind of end the conversation, unless you care and you think that person's capable of grasping or getting the questions that are problematic about what they're saying. And I appreciate
I can ask that, John.
TJump's ability to kind of like get right to the heart of it, because otherwise, like, we can chase all the different tangents, all of which can be fun, but it can be really exhausting. And like, you don't owe the person the sort of like exhaustion match of like chasing every tangent that they bring up.
I think that's an
and
important point.
And I have another objection. So every single time Otangelo comes on, he starts reading off of his blog. I think that the next time we're going to have Otangelo on, we're going to talk to him, and he can tell us everything he wants us to know in his own words. Sitting here and listening to him reading his own blog or other people's websites, that is an entirely waste of time, and I think it's rude to everyone else who's in the audience having their hand up. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, everyone. Taco, I guess. Oh, Jefferson, looks like you had something to say.
Yeah, so I've known Otangelo for a while, and occasionally he'd show up on my YouTube things. I've interacted with him for several years now. I haven't seen anything from him over the past few years that has demonstrated to me that I think he suffers from what a lot of people. I mean, it's a human thing. He tends to approach a lot of these conversations like he wants to engage in a comparison of arguments, but that's not what he's actually doing. If you listen to what he's saying, the subtext is pretty obvious. He's interested in appealing narratives, and the God narrative is the most appealing explanation for why stuff is, and that's why he tends to fixate on it. The rest of the stuff I think that he ends up using is just a way of backstopping that appealing narrative. And I haven't seen him do anything or say anything that really has led me to any other conclusion, because it doesn't matter what counter arguments are presented to him. Ultimately, at the end of the day, he'll end up doing the thing where if he can't explain something like where energy comes from, and someone can't explain the origin of, say, a quantum field or something like that, he wants to know, like a 4-year-old, why. He needs an answer for every question you bring up, but he doesn't need questions for his. That to me betrays his position, which is the God of the Bible is about narrative appeal. It's not about being argumentatively convincing. So that's just
by the way, happy birthday, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very
So
much.
yeah, it's a special pleading that he's doing.
Mm-hmm. I have another comment that I need to make for the person that I just deleted. I deleted.
Okay,
the DM.
just a sec, Peter. I just want to say, Jason, we're gonna get Jason, we're gonna get to you in just a moment. We're really glad you're here. So go ahead, Peter.
I'm really short. So the person who just DM'd me, I am not a cigarette. I am smoking one, and you should use the word cigarette, not the slur word that you used. Thank you.
So Jason wanted to discuss worm gods or something?
No. Today is going to be a much more triggering topic than that. I predict a bunch of optical illusions you can't verify come in and everything like this. But let's
I'm happy to hear we're not going to talk about my penis.
Got him. I'm saying that we are created by not a god, but something that is more intelligent than us, because the Earth is flat and stationary, and that is a thing that had to be created, not evolved from a lump of rocks in space.
Can I ask for a clarification, Jason?
Yes, sir. Like,
why does basic geometry refute the flat Earth position?
I don't care about geometry. I'm talking about scientific experimentation that proves that there is no curvature whatsoever.
We don't live geometry.
Look at geometry.
Mathematics.
Yeah, what you talking about?
Mathematics refutes the flat Earth position.
Okay, you can refute it all day long, but you got any science to back it up?
Yes, we do have science to back that up.
What scientific experimentation do you have to prove to you that you're on a ball that is floating through space?
What experimentation?
Scientific? No. Very specific wording I'm using. Do you have any scientific experimentation that proves that you're on a ball and it's moving?
Yes.
Go for it. I hope it's not an optical illusion.
Eratosthenes.
Okay. Oh, good for you. Good for you. That's excellent. Most people can't even come up with that. Eratosthenes did what? Explain to the audience for us, if you would.
Okay, well, I mean, are we doing a science lesson here? I'm talking about like sticks and shadows, and
super simple, right?
Yeah, it's pretty basic. It's how we understand that the Earth is curved. It's literally geometry. It's basic math. And also shadows on the moon. Shadows on the moon. The angular degrees of shadows on the moon and depictions of shadows, how light works around around 3-dimensional bodies. Sure. What you're describing as the flat Earth cannot, like what we observe, doesn't reflect a flat Earth model.
Okay,
So,
well, let's
and
do,
predictions can be made if we
Right.
take the spherical Earth and we take the model that we understand, and then we make predictions with that model, and then we'll say, so for example, let's go to the beginning. Let's presume that the Earth is round and the Moon is round, and that we orbit the Sun. You know, all this stuff. The what we teach kids. When we take this model that we've created and we make predictions with that model, and those predictions come true, they verify the model. Okay? So if the sun is 93 million miles away and the Earth is the size it has, and the circumference of the Earth, and the moon is so far away, and the moon is the distance it has, and the moon is its size, okay, then we can use basic mathematics to make predictions about when we will see particular phenomena. Like when particular phenomena will become visible. Like we can predict when the sun will rise down to the millisecond.
I thought I was here to talk.
Or when the moon will appear in the sky to the millisecond, depending upon your coordinates on the Earth.
Yeah, I could have
now when we make those predictions, and those predictions comes true, they verify the model that we're using as correct.
So, Jason,
yes.
Now flat Earth is kind of off topic for us here, unless you're able to tie it into proving that a God exists.
I think I just did. I think you have to have some kind of intelligent creation in order to make a flat, stationary biodome that houses living creatures. Be quiet. Be quiet. I was invited up here to speak. Could you be quiet, please?
Jason, I just refuted that.
I don't care what you do. Be quiet. Do it while you're muted.
Dude,
somebody asked me a question and you're literally interrupting me, man.
You cannot appeal to it being flat anymore. You can't appeal to it.
I'm trying to answer this other guy's question. If you could just be quiet and stop interrupting me, that would be so swell, dude.
You can't appeal to it being flat anymore. I have refuted that.
Science proves that it's flat and stationary. You have optical illusions. You have optical illusions and silly ass math that you try to make.
All right, can we get back on topic now? So his argument is that
the topic is that somebody created the flat stationary Earth. It has to be created versus a lump of rocks that gathered together via a theoretical concept called gravity in the abundance of space. One is a theory. One is actually we can prove scientifically.
Jason, my response to you, Jason, is that it doesn't look to me like the Earth is flat, so I'm not convinced by your argument.
Well, that's why you don't trust your eyes. You trust scientific experimentation. And you don't even know enough about your eyes to even know if you can trust your eyes. You don't understand perspective and atmospheric interferences and things like these. You totally leave out because of your lack of knowledge, because you've taught your ball Earth bullshit, and it is actually literally blinded you from seeing things
You're now making assumptions about the amount of knowledge I have about my eyes. You actually don't know how much I know and don't know. And I'm not going to confirm or deny it. But I mean, this is an assumption you're making instead of supporting your argument.
We have a creator. And if the Earth is a ball, we don't. That's the basis of this.
No,
and all you can do that you can prove that you're.
No, sorry. The spherical Earth and the concept of a God are not mutually exclusive concepts.
Come on. Okay, thank you for coming up, Jason.
He's lying, and he knows he's lying. He knows he is. There is nothing fruitful to come from this. There is nothing attached to it. These are not mutually exclusive concepts.
I think he believes it.
I don't think he does.
I don't think he does. Yeah, agree, Jefferson. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, here's the thing, if he does agree with it. So in 2018, I'm not a big fan of Netflix, but they actually did a pretty decent, there was a decent documentary that they did called Behind the Curve.
Yes.
Featured in the video throughout it, there's a guy, I can't remember his first name, but his name is Campanella. He does the light experiment. If you watch that, they end up proving that, right, he sets this thing up, it should be able to shine a light from one post to another post, and if it's going from one side to the other, taking into account the curvature of the Earth, it should be at a different point. And it actually does prove for them, right? It demonstrates that there's curvature to the Earth. Of course, this troubles them, and that's kind of where it's a spoiler alert, right? For anybody that's a flat earther, watch that. So if you want a scientific experiment not conducted by somebody quote unquote biased, one of the globos, watch that one where a bunch of flat earthers conduct this experiment and faceplant. It proves
you seriously are going to bring up Netflix?
Yeah, it's that documentary is interviews with many different flat Earth proponents, and it features them and follows them. Interspersed throughout that is their experiment to conclusively prove that the Earth is flat, and they end up confirming the opposite.
Yes.
Their own experiment.
Okay, Jason, you have 1 minute to make your concluding
Thank you.
remarks.
Okay, so Netflix is not science. A goon on the land cutting a hole in a piece of styrofoam with a pocket knife and shining lights up and down is not science. If you believe that's science, that is why I understand that you think you're on a ball Earth. Science, Bedford level, the original Bedford level, showed us that there is no curvature. Infrared cameras showed that there is no curvature. The record. Shut up. The record. The record for the longest.
I'm not going to shut up because you are flat out lying at this point. These are lies. These are straight up lies, and they have been refuted time and time again. The whole infrared thing with Mount Jacinto demonstrates that you have no idea what you're talking about, or you're just flat out lying. No, this is not going to take place. He is just flat out 100% lying at this point.
Doesn't this guy feed his worms something to keep him cooler? I mean, he seems kind of triggered.
No.
It's freaking ridiculous.
The worms eat him.
Okay.
Oh, worms eat him. I'm sorry.
Coming up.
I was actually hoping that he was going to tie worms into the flat Earth stuff, and it's a shame he got so angry. He's usually more pleasant than this.
Me too, Randolph. I was looking forward to that same thing. Like,
Well,
okay,
when the
where do the worms
get
live?
big enough, that's how we get the hollow Earth.
And Jefferson, this is the big thing. Like on the documentary that you're talking about, yes, that was Jeranism who did that, and that's where the meme comes from of like him saying interesting because he realized it refuted what his position was. But not only that, but you have Bob Nodell himself, who is a massive dude, a big proponent of this, who was literally caught saying we did this experiment with the gyroscope and discovered that there was a drift of 15 degrees per hour, and that and he was caught on tape saying that we need to hide this information because it's really damaging to our position. We can't let this get out. He was caught on tape saying this. Okay, it's a lie. It is a lie. It is a grift, and people should reject it at all costs. Basic mathematics. Professor Dave did an entire series on how you can prove the spherical model of the Earth is true with just observations. Okay, it's beyond dumb.
Feeds my point, actually, JL, and I only have a few minutes because I'm heading into somewhere, but I am sick and tired of inductive arguments being made to support theistic claims as necessary when the inductive arguments obviously are missing half of the observations available. So, for instance, in Antangelo's case, he's making the inductive argument that we observe mind-involved processes, therefore anything that exists must emanate from a mind-dependent process. That's half the observations that we make. Yes, of course we observe that, but we also observe processes happening in the natural world that don't have any.
So before you continue, Enriquez, just one last observation I want to put in here is, and welcome to the stage, is that it seems that flat Earth is probably one of the one of the least happiest topics to cover.
Very true.
Oh, go ahead, Enriquez. I'm sorry.
We're all kind of tired of it because a lot of us here have been round and round and round with several different flat earthers for years, and
I love the irony of the statement that you just made. Round and round and round.
Yes. Like a flat disc.
It's very. I mean, just the predictions made in 2016 when Comet. I think it was 2016 or 2018 when Comet Neowise was passing into the visible range of Earth. This was a big thing that made headline. When you just look up in the sky at this particular time, and you will see Comet Neowise. In order for that to be true, that is a prediction because Neowise wasn't visible. They said it's going to be visible at this time, and then we need to look up in the sky and we'll see Comet Neowise when it was making its very close pass. In order for that prediction to come true, okay, or say like in 2027, I think it's 2027 when the next total solar eclipse will occur, and the path of totality specifically over Dallas, and we're going to go down there to go see that. If Neowise predictions came true, and the solar eclipse predictions will come true, so the fact that those came true verifies that all the information we put into to make those predictions are all true, is all correct. So it's beyond refuted. It's done. It's like this is why the analytics on flat Earth have completely plummeted, and nobody is doing. Only the trolls and grifters are still making content on.
Well,
this.
One quick comment from our YouTube audience. Maynard Saves is pointing out that if there is no gravity, what holds flat Earth together? But Andrikas, welcome to our stage. What have you got for us today? Are you presenting an argument that a god or a goddess exists?
No, I am not. I'm just going to say these guys all know me. And I think that you guys, I mean, all of us need to hold a harder line on the inductive claims made by these guys. Because, I mean, what that last guy said, that people making a hypothesis and putting lights behind, up to a hole in a thing and testing the results is not science. What the hell? That is science. I just think we need to hold these guys to a harder line. If they're going to use induction to make an inference leading to their argument, like, only we observe minds doing this, so therefore if something resembles what a mind is doing, therefore everything must be from mind, when our observations actually observe things happening that don't have minds involved, complex processes, things being created, things organizing that don't have a parent mind involved. We have those observations as well. So both hypotheses are equally possible, that mind is involved and mind could not be involved. So we just need to hold a harder line on the inductive cases that these guys bring, because almost every time they are incomplete, sorely incomplete.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to put you down in our YouTube list as atheist then, I guess, because you're obviously not a theist.
Agnostic, please don't list me as atheist. Please.
Yeah, he's agnostic.
No problem.
He's one of those. He's those dirty
enjoying
fence sitting
splinters up his ass sitting on that fence.
He's like a dirty fence sitting agnostic.
No, it's done. No problem. It's done.
Andricus, if you want to go into why you think that distinction is really important to you, that could be interesting. Up to you.
I only had a few minutes. I'm heading into work, so next time I'll try to catch you guys next time. We can
good
go
to hear from you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, good to see you too.
It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Keep tearing it up, man.
You bet.
Concrete, I invited you up.
And Concrete actually messaged me or sent me a message, or put a message in Heathen Hangout in the text chat and said that I keep interrupting interesting conversation. Jason has nothing interesting to bring forward. I will always interrupt it because he's lying his ass off. And he's demonstrable lies that I have refuted time and time again. So I'm always going to give him crap.
Concrete's been waiting a while, so I'm giving him a moment.
Okay, but we do have a show going, so we should probably move on and try him again later.
Asline wants to discuss Christian meta-ethics. Oh, Concrete is here.
Oh, Concrete's here. Great. Hello, Concrete Plus.
What up, ladies and gentlemen? I don't know if you're any ladies, but
yeah,
that's the polite thing to say.
We'll give you a moment to explain your point of view and the argument. And
I wanted to cover a couple of things real fast.
Sure.
I don't know why. We talked about it during the pre-show about JL like incessantly over talking and cutting people off. I don't know. It's like, JL, do you realize you're cheating? Like you have the bully pulpit and you're like being a bully. Do you realize that or no?
Okay, so we're not going to do that. If you want to talk about the topic, we can talk about the topic. You're welcome. We would love to discuss with you.
Yeah, we already addressed it at pre-show, so I'm So Concrete, let's stick to the topic. We already addressed it pre-show.
You guys have no problem. Look, you guys have no problem like casting aspersions against Antangelo, claiming he's just
Okay, so Asline wants to discuss Christian meta-ethics.
Hello, Asline. Welcome.
Hello, good morning, y'all. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You sound great. What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, perfect. So I was just kind of so last time we talked about divine command theory, and so wanted to kind of go over that as the only viable meta ethic that we can have for determining, or the basis for normative ethics. So as I said last time, I usually try to lay out my case first before I go into the back and forth, and so I'll try to be a little brief. But I have a couple points.
This actually fits our format here, so go ahead.
Sure. So I would argue that divine command theory is the only position that can offer both an account for objective morality and objective moral obligations, because the good is grounded in God's essential properties that we can apprehend through the Holy Spirit, and that God's authority provides those moral obligations. So one thing that when discussing about divine command theory is that it has to be nested within a worldview. I don't agree with an abstract sort of deistic God that has divine command theory, because that's inherently imprecise and flawed, and it will net a lot of the contradictory results that a lot of the criticisms have been made. So under the Christian paradigm, we think that God loves us and wants what's best for us, that there's a greater telos to the world that God has planned for humanity, one that we don't fully recognize, and that kind of arguments like, what if God commanded immoral actions, are only objections to the divine command meta ethics if you believe that God is just an arbitrary deity who has no greater purpose to what he commands. He just makes up rules as he goes. And so that means that any evaluation of God's commands must be evaluated on its own grounds. So you can only critique divine command theory internally, because any external critique relies on a reference to a different meta ethic, which denies the thesis of divine command theory. Divine hiddenness is the answer to most of the main objection of divine command theory, because we don't know what the will and mind of God is. I would liken it to, like, if a parent might deprive a child of eating too many sweets, we might view that action as directly evil or harmful, but the greater knowledge taken into account, we recognize that action is good.
Wait, could we just go back to your original statement? So before you start
Sure.
addressing criticisms, let's just go back to, so you said that divine command theory is the only possible justification for objective morality, or something along those lines?
Yes.
How is divine command theory, which is literally a subject giving commands, not subjective?
Because God is the objective standard, the objective moral arbiter of or the objective standard by which we would determine what morals are.
What is the definition of a subject?
I don't know. You can give me your definition.
It's an individual, a person or thing being discussed, and a person. So is God a subject? Like, I'm not God, you're not God. God is God. He's a subject.
It's a little tricky. Like, if you want to say, like, that's a subjective objective distinction. I think that God is the objective. Like, you could say that he's a person, but I don't think it would make a difference.
He has a mind, and it's different from my mind. It's different from your mind. It's God's mind is over there, and our mind is over here, and they're not the same, right? So God is a subject. I'm a subject. You're a subject. We're all different subjects.
So when we use the term like objective, subjective, I'm mostly talking about in application with humans like us, because God's subject.
That's special pleading. So this is what I'm saying. God is a subject. He has a mind. He has opinions. He has his own feelings. So him giving dictates, like divine command theory, is by definition subjective morality. By the definitions that everyone in philosophy uses, that's subjective morality. You can't say it's objective to humans, but not objective to this other subject, because that's by definition subjective. Objective means independent of all opinion, intuition, minds, all of it. It includes God. So
it's one of God's essential properties. It's hard to make analogy between God and humans, because God doesn't have a reference.
This isn't an analogy. Literally, is God a subject? That's what I'm asking. Is God a mind that is different from my mind and your mind?
It's like a weird way of language. Like, I guess, could you get to your point?
Yeah, is God a mind who is different from my mind? Yes or no?
God, yes, it is different.
Okay, so he is a subject by definition. That's what a subject means. He is a person.
So we could talk. So sure, we could talk about God as a subject, I guess.
Sure. So
we're saying that.
So divine command theory
doesn't really contrast.
Divine command theory is this person, this subject, giving command. The subject of God, the person of God is giving commands, the divine commands, right?
Yeah.
So that's subjective because a subject is giving commands. That's literally the opposite of objective.
So the reason why this question is a little like weird is because when we talk about like subjective, it's with reference to something greater. God doesn't have something greater. God is the ultimate and objective
No, subjective
arbiter for.
subjective has nothing to do with greater or lesser. Subjective is just a person. It's an individual, a single
Okay.
entity. That's all it means.
Well, so I fail to see how this is an objection.
Well, it's
because
not.
our argument is that God's properties are essential and they don't require a referent
That doesn't
behind
matter.
it.
None of that
that
matters.
are
So the question is it objective? Is the morality objective? Objective means not influenced by personal feelings or opinions or considerings an individual.
Yes, they're grounded in God's essence.
That's
like I don't
that's
know.
a person
I
that's
don't
influenced by personal feelings. That's literally subjective.
I don't understand where you're going with this. Like,
So the definition of objective is not influenced by personal feelings, opinions, considerations of an individual. And then you keep saying that God is this individual, he keeps determining morality. So that's literally a contradiction to say that God's dictates are objective because God's dictates are his personal feelings or his nature or whatever.
does it help out if it's that God's existence and his essence and his properties are all
Makes no difference.
necessary?
Makes zero difference. It doesn't matter what his nature is. If God is a person, if he is a subject, and his dictates are determined by his subjective nature, then his morality is by definition subjective.
So let me get to the heart of your question. I think what I'm hearing is that you're saying that God's will is arbitrary and that he can
it has
dictate whatever.
absolutely
Is that
nothing
the-
to do with it. I don't care.
Well,
God's
then I
will could
don't
be
see-
completely 100% determined by his nature. It's still subjective to his nature.
Okay, wait. So then it's just the word game.
No.
Like you just don't like me using the term objective.
Well, no, it's just by definition not objective. So objective literally means not determined by the personal nature of the individual. And you're saying that morality is determined by the personal nature of this individual. So if you want to say that divine command theory is a subjective morality, yes, I agree.
Well, so the reason I'm saying this is because when we're using terms subjective, objective, I'm using it in reference to human beings.
Well, that's literally not what they mean. You can't do that. That's literally not what those words mean.
Yeah, but like in our circumstance, God lays the foundation for all of objective reality. You would agree that objective reality is objective, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so we would say that God is the grounding for all of objective reality. We apprehend that. And so when we say things like objective morality exists, we say that we are apprehending God, who is the ultimate necessary standard.
So
we
morality
apprehend
subjective.
that, and
that's literally still a contradiction. So that's still subjective morality. So if God determines morality based off of his personal feelings and preferences and nature, that is by definition subjective morality. Now, if morality is a thing that's independent of God objectively for all minds, then it would be objective. But it wouldn't be objective if it comes from God's subjective personal feelings.
I mean, for the sake of moving on, we can go ahead and call God's morality subjective if you want. It doesn't make a difference.
It's also interesting to bring up, just as a kind of a side note, is that essentially what you stated is that if reality is the way reality is because that's the way God created it, but God could have created it in an infinite number of possible ways. He just happens to have created it this way. So if reality was decided to be created this particular way by God, then reality in and of itself is subjective to God. And everything within that reality is subjective also to the whims of God. And
sure.
So morality, which is included in that, or moral distinctions or moral valuations, are also subjective to God. So if God's determination, just because God is the biggest, baddest on the block, doesn't make what it says objective. It just means it's giving the standard, which is determined by it. And if God can change that standard at any time, if at one point it could say this is immoral, but later on say now it's not so immoral, now it's moral, if it can change its position, that means it's completely arbitrary.
Oh, I see what the confusion is. So God doesn't have to abide by a set of morals because he is the moral standard, and he doesn't issue obligations to himself. He doesn't issue against himself, so he has no moral obligations. Like that's the difference.
So like go back to your original statement. Your original statement is that divine command theory is the only thing that can provide a basis of objective morality. Now,
Yes.
objective in philosophy means independent of personal feelings and opinions. So that means that it can't be objective. So you must mean something else by objective. What are you talking about when you think divine command theory can be the only basis of like morality?
Like this is why it's like just a word game, is because I think that God is the objective standard. God's properties are the essential
You said it's the
objective
only thing that
standard.
can be. You said it's the only thing that could be, right?
The what?
You said it's the only thing that could be the basis of objective morality. I could say God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Objective morality is fine. Like objective morality can exist as a platonic object, it can exist as a law of nature, it can exist as an
Yeah,
a
so
priori
that's
abstracts. Why wouldn't those count as objective moralities?
yeah, no. That's my, like, you can. I'm not saying that there's no possible way to ground objective morality. I'm saying that it's this divine command theory is the only viable method.
Why is it the only viable? Like, I think it's not a viable
Because
method.
the alternate, because like the alternatives, like for example, anything that's like a worldly one, like utilitarianism, deontology, whatever,
those aren't objective. So
yeah, they're not objective. When you're talking about objective things like
moral naturalism.
Yeah, moral naturalism. That where is first is that how do you get an objective morality when like all we have are subjectives, and then where do you get objective moral obligations when obligations are all inherently subjective?
Well, you don't need obligations, and it could just be a law. But so the question is you said divine command theory is the only thing that's possible. I clearly think that's false. Like every philosopher thinks that's false.
It's not possibility. It's about viability.
Yeah,
It's the only consistent
viability. So how is divine command theory consistent when it seems to be the exact opposite of what we're talking about? Because when we want to say there's an objective morality, we want to say that there is something that's wrong or right or wrong, independent of what anybody thinks, including a God. No opinions of anyone matter, no matter what. Like the gravity, your opinion doesn't matter. Gravity is there whether you like it or not. That's what objective means.
So just for explanation and simplicity, when you take something like Platonism, where you believe that there are objective ideals and stuff like that exist in a separate realm, it's sort of like that, except all those properties are grounded in God's character, and so it's effectively the same, except it has that additional element of having a person that encapsulates all these things and also has personality that can lead to like the connection between the immaterial and material realm.
Okay, none of that made sense to me. So it seems like the model of moral naturalism. One sec. So the model of moral naturalism is that morality is like a thing in nature. It's just a part of reality, like gravity or physics or quantum fields. It's a thing in nature. That makes sense. That's very easy to understand. But you seem to be adding in all this other stuff that seems to like not make it objective. See, like it's God's mind, in God's nature, in the non-physical, in the spiritual, which has nothing to do with morality.
He brought up something that could convince me. You said immaterial. What is that? I'd like to know about that.
So I don't want to derail. I want to stick to like a morality thing, but objective morality is something that's immaterial but exists in the world. I don't want to get into the logic and induction or whatever again.
Asline, just to clarify, just make sure I'm
That's
on the same
what convinced me though.
Just to make sure I'm on.
Do you want to get into that?
Just to make sure that I'm on the same page, Asline. So God decrees what is moral, right?
No. So God's nature is good. So all his actions and commands are inherently good,
no matter what God does.
Yeah. So for example, the question of could God perform evil? It's logically contradictory to his nature.
So why is it possible that I can perceive what God does as evil if I can think of a better and more positive way of completing an action, and God didn't do that?
So that was what I brought up. I was like, I think that was my third point, is that you can't critique divine command theory on an external ground, because that inherently already denies the thesis of divine command theory. Because if your ethics are not grounded in God's commands, then the method you're evaluating divine command theory is already contradictory to what divine command theory says. So you need to do an internal critique of divine command theory, because
that's begging the question. So like if we want to compare if two models work, we like say take your model and test it, and take a different model and test it, and see which have the best result. You don't just like assume your model works.
No, it's not. That's not the point. When you're comparing two models, you're comparing them against a standard or a reference.
Right.
How is that? Like, that reference is exactly what's in debate, in discussion.
Can I ask you a question, Asline? Did you
Yeah.
read the papers that I sent you?
I did.
Okay, so you read
and-
God's Love is Irrelevant to the Ether Problem by Jason Thibodeau, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was like last
And-
week.
Okay. Can you steelman an understanding of its point?
Let me see. I think I wrote notes somewhere, but I can't find it.
Like
Um,
paragraph 3, it basically deals with what you're saying and how it's a faulty inference.
Yeah, could you recap that for me?
Okay. So if God were to command that we gratuitously torture infants, the gratuitous torture of infants would be obligatory. Okay.
Yes.
Now, I already know what your objection is, because I think you're just saying, oh, well, it has to be internal, and your worldview, as you put it, just grants or asserts that God's nature is omnibenevolent. God's nature is the source of morality. It's a divine command is just like a emanation of the properties of God's nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, even on a worldview where you claim that God is one way, you still have to follow the logical implications of the claim, and you can't just dismiss possible worlds just because you assert you're in one of one particular type, right? So if you make a logical claim and you say, well, we're in this world and any critique has to be internal to this world, which is the only possible world and whatever, and you expect everyone to just grant that assertion before they even talk to you about it, it doesn't get rid of possible world implications. And so if there's a possible world where the implications of your logic make the logic invalid and lead to absurd conclusions, then you still have to deal with that. Even claiming that God has these properties in this world doesn't get away from that, right? So in the first paragraphs with this claim, and what you're citing is basically the God's love objection, whether it be his nature or he just is this way in this world. It doesn't get you out of the implication that if God's ability to grant and be the grounding of moral grounding is a power, right? So if God's all powerful, one of his powers is being the moral grounding of morality. You believe that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That morality is grounded in his essence.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a power that God has, is being grounding morality, right?
I mean, a power, that terminology it implies that it's some sort of like arbitrary action that he does that creates it. I would say, well,
it's
just to
semantics,
clarify
right?
the point. Yeah, just to clarify the point is that it's grounded in his nature, so his actions are inherently flow.
Okay. So divine command theory makes the claim that God has moral grounding power. You can word it in different ways. You can call it just his properties, his nature, whatever. He has the property of doing this thing, right? Now, you don't get out of the problem of, okay, so if that's a power that a being can have, right, then other beings that we can imagine with that power, we have to consider what the implications of that would be. You don't get out of, if God were to command that we gratuitously torture infants, gratuitous torture of infants would be obligatory by saying, well, he just doesn't or just wouldn't, right? So you still have a reductio ad absurdum that doesn't go away by just claiming that he just would never do that.
Well, it's not about just like arbitrarily starting with the point that says that if we define God has these properties and therefore it's not possible. It's about whether it's logically consistent and whether or not this possible world's analysis would actually allow for that possible world. If we believe that God's properties and essential attributes are necessary, then there is no possible world in which which God is not good, because it's a logically necessary property of God.
Well, doesn't answer
so
the question.
When we talk about
so the question is more, if you define God as the thing that grounds goodness, then whatever God's nature is determines what goodness is, and you just have to accept whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah, but again,
so that doesn't tell you what goodness is. Now, maybe whatever God's nature was, if God's nature was to drown all babies, And since God's nature grounds goodness, then drawing all babies would be goodness. Now, obviously, you don't think that's possible, but because goodness is simply defined as whatever God's nature is, then that doesn't tell you any about goodness.
Yeah, so I mean, just to back up a little bit, is that goodness under a Christian paradigm, goodness is kind of like a distance between God and away from God. That evil is furthest distance from God, goodness is closest distance to God. And so the movement or the God's commandments are grounded in that sort of measurement, whereby actions that are good are things that move towards God, things that are evil move you away from God. And so
let me
a certain
give you,
action,
let me give you an
a
example.
certain action.
So like if I said blurg is the property of being closest to the nature of Uncle Bob. So if you do something that's closer to the nature of Uncle Bob, you're closer to blurg. But does that tell you what actions are like Uncle Bob? Does it tell you what you should do or shouldn't do? Can you differentiate the good actions from the bad actions?
Wait, hold on. Repeat that.
So blurg, I'm making property, the blurg property.
What?
And blurg
Mhm.
property is doing something that's closer to the nature of Uncle Bob. So if, let's say maybe Uncle Bob is a smoker. And so if you smoke, you're being more blurg because you're being more like Uncle Bob. But we don't know anything about Uncle Bob. We have no idea what he's like. So if you say being blurg is like being like Uncle Bob, that tells you nothing about Uncle Bob, right?
Yeah.
So that means
this is
that
weird.
if your entailment here, blurg means just like Uncle Bob, and morality means like God, those don't actually say anything about morality. It doesn't say anything about what the good and the bad is. It says nothing. It tells us no information
so there are two
whatsoever.
things. So there are two things. Is that first is that a lot of these things are revealed in the Bible that you
No,
would
that's
take.
separate. That's separate. So
take
we're just talking about morality here. So if you
Yeah, no,
simply
that's my point. Is that I don't believe in an abstract, deistic, divine command theory God, and
it
I
doesn't
don't.
matter.
Of course, it matters. Like that's
the only thing that we're arguing is that by your definition of morality, morality is like God. That is completely irrelevant to morality because it doesn't tell us anything about morality. You say morality is like God. Oh, and God is all of these other things. Well, you can skip that and say, well, morality is doing these things, right? You don't need the intermediary step of morality is like God. So the problem here is that if you simply define morality as like God, that has the implication that morality is subjectively determined by God's nature, whatever it is. It's drowning babies, then drowning babies would be moral.
So that's it's not about God arbitrarily. So just to take it a different direction, this is exactly the same thing as humanist ethics. Is that when humanist ethics they say like certain things like lying is wrong, stealing is wrong, or whatever. All those things like they're just arbitrary rules unless there's a telos, there's a goal for this, and that goal for secular societies is like the improvement of society or like well-being or some arbitrary thing that
goals
Sam Harris
goals
comes
are
up
subjective.
with.
So,
But
wait.
I know, but that's my point. Is that the Christian worldview has an objective one where
That's
it's not
subjective.
defined by.
That's literally subjective.
Well, this is just wordplay because
all
this is just
goals are
wordplay
subjective.
because I think that
No, it's not.
God's objectives.
No, all goals
saying God
are
is
subjective.
good?
What?
Are you saying like God is good? Because if
Yeah,
that's
God
the case,
is good.
Like, and you're just saying God is really all you're saying. You're not really expressing.
No,
anything.
that's the is. It's not the is of identity. It's the is of predication.
So, Aslan, the problem is that you're asserting that your worldview has some desirable property, namely your claim that it's objective. TJump points out that it shouldn't be considered objective under what we mean by that philosophically, and you don't seem to get that. But just leave that aside for a second. Why is it important to believe that you have objective morality and then claim that your system having objective morality is the only possible usable form of morality or acceptable one? It seems like that's just subjective to your tastes, right? Like you seem to prefer that. Most people who make these arguments just like assume everyone's just going to prefer the thing that they say that you need, but that's just a value choice of yours, right? Like
Well,
someone else,
it's
like
about
an theorist or someone who thinks like moral naturalism is true, can just say, look, my moral system works for me and it seems descriptively accurate to the way people actually operate. And your argument is not persuasive. It's just saying, hey, if you like this kind of a system, here's a way to convince yourself that you think you have such a system.
No, it's a totally different thing, because any other system besides one that believes in God are subjective and are prone to change just based on whatever. When we say that if God exists and God is the supreme authority, then there is no questioning. It has to be like morality has to be in this way. But when you take alternative forms, you have where it's based off well-being, based on whatever, then you have these breakdowns of any system is equally valid because they just have arguments for it. So the Nazi society, Marxist society, communist, Soviet, whatever, all these ones that take that goal or take that sort of morality, the grounding for morality, and take it and turn it in whatever direction they want. That is what we're trying to avoid. We're saying that morality is not subjective and not contingent upon certain things that are changing or arbitrariness.
Like
And
the
that's
law
the
of
difference.
physics that would solve the problem. So law of physics, it's unchanging, it's unarbitrary, no one gets an opinion, there are no arguments, it's a fact of
But you
nature.
can't break the law of physics.
Well, that doesn't matter.
You
So,
can
like,
break morality. Like
no,
you can
can't.
go against.
You can be immoral.
You can act. Yeah, you can act.
But that doesn't
immoral.
break any law of physics. Like you can say morality
I
is
can't just
determined.
float
Wait,
upwards
stop,
one
stop, stop,
day.
stop, stop. You can say it is a law of physics that killing babies is immoral, but that doesn't mean that that law forces you not to kill babies. Like gravity pulls you down, but it doesn't force you into a little tiny black hole. So some laws don't have to be so powerful that they force you to act in a certain way.
Yeah, but my point is that it's not analogous to
what
the whatever.
What
But fine.
That literally fits your
actually
definition
go
of
back.
objective. That literally fits
Well,
your definition
it's
of
not
objective.
analogous because laws of physics we can't just violate the laws of physics.
I already said
whereas
that
we
you don't
can
need to.
violate.
So like
Yeah,
laws
but
of
I'm
physics,
just saying it's a false
laws
analogy.
of physics don't force you to do things 100%. Not all laws of physics are powerful enough to force you to things.
Gravity.
So the law of morality doesn't need to force you to not be moral. So there's no contradiction there. Works perfectly fine.
Well, gravity is one example that you can't just change.
Yes, not
like,
all
on your own.
laws of physics. So gravity, you can go against it because it's not powerful enough to force you into a black hole. If gravity was super powerful, you wouldn't be jump. The fact that you're able to jump and use other forces to contradict that force means that yes, you could have other forces like electromagnetism that can go against morality. The fact that the moral law you can go against it doesn't mean it's not physics.
Yeah. So I want to table that. I want to go back to X's point actually. So you're talking about and not trying to dodge, just trying to focus the discussion. So you're talking about like a possible world in which God had commanded the torturing of children. So I would say I would say like kind of my intuitive feels that that's impossible because it's not grounded in God's nature. But let's take the Ross hypothetical whereby God argued for the torturing of children or something like that. If you were evaluating on a Christian paradigm, if it happened, and this is really tricky because I don't think it's possible, but if you're evaluating on a Christian paradigm, it would be because for some reason that action leads to a movement towards God. And therefore it would be good in that framework. The problem is that when we say stuff like that, there's emotion to it, like the emotion of torturing children. Now, and that's something we inherently think is wrong, which is why I don't think it's possible in the world. But remember, when you're saying that, you are borrowing a certain ethics that is not grounded in divine command theory to evaluate whether or not that action is ethical. And that's why I said that you have to debate, you have to argue internally, because when you already borrow from a different ethical system, you are already going away from divine command theory.
So
that's
you're actually, the thing about torturing children is something that there are people who think it's okay, and that's why they do it. They've got whatever reason for it. It's not an inherent thing. They see nothing wrong with it. Unfortunately, there are people like that in the world. So to say that it's inherent of all humans would be incorrect. I think or innate. It is. I think everybody here, it's safe to say, disagrees with child torture. But then we take a look at a religion like Christianity or Islam, which tortures children, infants, by circumcising them, and then that results in lifelong problems. So there are many people and many examples of ideologies that say that it's okay to torture children. So I have a lot of trouble with that argument you're making.
Hey, Asline,
I want to reply because he was talking to me.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. So, I'm sorry, X, go ahead. My bad.
Okay, Asline. So I asked you if you'd read the paper and if you could still man it, and I tried to summarize just the introduction to it. But from what you're saying, it sounds like you still don't quite get it. I sent you the
Yeah,
the
actually,
syllogism.
yeah, I
Can
looked
I?
it up. I think I didn't read it. I read the other paper.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a bit complicated, but I think it's important to understand this because this is like the strongest argument against. I think TJump made a really good point, which is that it's just actually subjective, because if what you value is it being objective, it's not going to give you what you think you want. But if you look at this paper's point, and I put the syllogism in the chat, it's 8 premises or eight steps. Do you want to go through it with me?
Sure, I'm looking
Okay.
at it, but
We'll try to go through it quickly. Okay, premise 1. If divine command theory is true, God has moral grounding power. Would you at least agree with premise 1?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Premise 2. Any omnipotent being would have the same power that God has.
I'm not really sure what that even means. Like,
Okay.
are you saying
So
that there
when we
can
talk
be an
about a possible
alternative to
world,
God?
okay, we talk about a possible world. Let's just take a world like the one imagined by people prior to the the Yahwists or whatever of Samaria or whatever. So there were like other Yahwists, Canaanites with different deities, which historically evolved into the belief in Yahweh. So let's say
Oh,
they're
so you're
correct.
talking like, for example,
Let's
like
just
the
say a
Islam
different
God,
world
right?
exists. Okay,
Sure.
and this is even you can do this even in your worldview. So you can't just run away from this and say, well, my worldview doesn't allow for other possible worlds. Okay, so in your worldview, you can still imagine that what if this other tribe of early Yahwists, like the Kenites or the Canaanites or whatever, and Baal or some other god turns out to be the truth, and that god is also omnipotent. Would you agree that in that world it would have the powers that God does? Your God, right?
So for the sake of argument, I'll say yes, but
Okay.
theologically, I don't.
Okay. I'm not saying you agree that is your world. I'm saying you can still imagine it as a possible world. Okay. So
Sure.
premise 3: in some world there exists that is like God, except he's not omnibenevolent. Henceforth, we'll call this being Yod for the sake of the argument. So your worldview is you think it's God and God's omnibenevolent, but there's another possible world, say one imagined by some other believers, and if they're right, then Yod exists. Yod is omnipotent. Yod has the same powers as God, and Yod is not omnibenevolent. Is that a possible world that you can imagine?
No, because so it's so there are two problems. So I looked through the whole syllogism. There's two problems, and I'll just break it down so it's a lot easier. So first is
Address
that
this premise first before we go into something else.
well, I mean, it's addressing this premise is that when you're talking about like we're talking, all we have is this world and all the references from this world. So if you
That
believe,
doesn't get
if
you
I
out of
believe,
possible worlds.
yeah, it does because you can't.
No.
So for example, if
Not a
I
valid
try to imagine, if I try to imagine a world where there was no God and there's like just computers and whatever, all of our references to that possible world are borrowed from this world.
All you need to do, for the sake of this premise, is grant that the believers of Yod believe in the possible world where their God's not omnibenevolent, and there's no like contradiction in their imagined possible world.
Sure.
You might disagree that the evidence is our world isn't like that, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're just saying that look, the believers of Yod believe in a possible world, and you can't point to any contradiction in their possible worldview.
Okay, so in this world, morality would not be objective because God is not benevolent. That would be my response to that.
We haven't gotten there. We're just trying to establish, is there some contradiction that makes it not a possible world? Like, would a square circle exist? Would a 2 + 2 = 5? Is there something absurd about their possible world? I don't think there is, and I think you have to grant premise 3.
So I'll grant it for the sake of argument, but this is nuanced because this God would not be the God that I believe in. But
We already established that, right? This is Yod,
sure.
not God. Okay. All right. Now, premise 4: if divine command theory is true, Yod has moral grounding power. Because premise 1 is that God has moral grounding power. Premise 2 is an omnipotent being has the powers of God. And premise 3 is that if these believers of Yod are correct in their possible world, their possible God would have moral grounding powers, but it would be Yod.
Yeah.
Okay. So in some possible world, Yod commands gratuitous torture of children, right? Maybe they believe that's what Yod
but
commands.
Yod,
Okay?
But Yod provides no grounding for for objective morality because he's not benevolent.
So that's not quite where we're going with this. So when we say that God is morally grounding, he has that power, it's because of his nature. So in the world where Yod's nature is to gratuitously torture infants, that just is what it means to be good. That is morally grounded in he has the power to ground it that way.
If God is not benevolent, then there is no good or bad. It's all arbitrary, and that's
I don't
why
understand
premise 6.
the inference you're making. You're making an assertion, right? But what you're
No.
actually appealing to is something like benevolence, which is different than God's moral grounding power. So if you appeal to benevolence, like this just gets back to Euthyphro, right? If you say, look, it wouldn't be morally grounding if it wasn't benevolent, then you're actually saying God doesn't have moral grounding power. Commands that are benevolent are morally grounding because they're benevolent, which is not appealing to God's authority or power to be morally grounding.
So, like, just to simplify things, because I think we're getting a little muddied. So the answer to the Euthyphro dilemma is not that God creates what's ethical and that's what we have to live by. It's that God's nature is good and his commands are good as a flow from that, and that when we apprehend the goodness, we are apprehending God's character. So we're not saying that like God just arbitrarily creates something that's good and that we have to follow that.
As the problem is though, is that it does become arbitrary, because you can just ask you can formulate like another question about the nature, and you can just say like, is it good in virtue of the properties that God possesses or not, right? And that's going to be a true dichotomy to answer. And if it is in virtue of the properties that God possesses, then it kind of goes back to Ix's point, because we're just highlighting this really like stance-dependent notion of what the good is, and so it just doesn't seem like you're wanting to cite it that it's arbitrary, but we can just ask that question about.
Well, so this is a misunderstanding of where we're getting God's properties.
Is why I know, but you gotta understand, like, this possible world, if you can't deliver some contradiction on why that possible world couldn't obtain.
Well, here's the confusion.
Well, hold on. If you couldn't like provide a contradiction, then and then we have this notion, like, I don't really see a defeater for this. It just seems to highlight what it's doing is it seems to highlight the arbitrariness of determining what the good is from God's nature or set of properties that he might possess, right?
Okay, yeah. So the confusion here is that like we're not saying that we define God to just be good and therefore good is good. We're saying that we believe you start with a premise that hopefully we agree with. If we don't agree with, then there's no point in discussion. But we agree that objective morality exists. Now, if objective morality exists, it has to be referent to something objective, like God's nature, and that's what we're basing it off of. And so when we say that God
what's
could be
different about that in Nix's case?
So when we say that God is not benevolent or is not good or whatever, then we don't have that reference, and therefore, as a follow-up, you can't have objective morality. So you'd reject objective morality.
Right. The problem is you're just replacing God's moral grounding power with benevolence as definitionally being what it means to be good. So you're just saying, right? So when we say that, and that's not divine command theory, by the way, right? Like I don't know why you think that's divine command theory metaethics, because it's really just like benevolent stuff is good and God's benevolent, so therefore God is moral grounding power. Let me just bring you back to the end of this, okay? So if divine command theory is true, there's a possible world in which the gratuitous torture of children is morally obligatory, because Yod would also have moral grounding power as part of being omnipotent, and there's a possible world where Yod commands gratuitous torture of children, and therefore it would be obligatory because of the moral grounding power of God's omnipotence. So we would all agree that there's no possible world in which the gratuitous torture of children is obligatory. So divine command theory is false because it leads to a contradiction in its possibilities that it presents. If it is sufficient to be the morally grounding authority as part of omnipotence, to make that what it means to be good, then Yod makes gratuitous torture of children good in that possible world by definition.
Yeah, I mean, so this like the what makes this complicated is that I think that this whole syllogism is wrought with problems, and so I can't just pick out one. But the fundamental problem. So fundamental problem. I'll just
simplify all of its premises.
I don't know.
One thing.
Well, you agreed to the premises, but one thing is that you switch it to like the omnibenevolence thing, but Like, it just seems like if it's the case that it determines the good, we could ask a similar question that I asked you earlier, which is like, is it going to be omnibenevolent in virtue of the properties that it has? And then in that case, it's going to be some stance dependent notion that Yah or whatever the counterexample is.
Yeah. So
this is determined. So I don't really see like what that's doing, because you're just highlighting something else again that seems seemingly arbitrary.
Yeah, so the heart, like I'll just respond with one thing, is that the heart of the problem with the syllogism is that, and this was my mistake for misunderstanding, is that you talk about moral grounding power. Moral grounding power is not some explicit action. It's rather it's his nature and how the good and evil in our world can be grounded in something, and that's grounded in God's essence, or God's goodness. So if God didn't have that goodness, if God wasn't moral or wasn't benevolent or whatever, then we wouldn't have that grounding. And that's the fundamental crux of the issue.
But it doesn't work, right? So there's a problem. Asserting that he does have it, and that's the reason why he does have moral grounding power, is to deny divine command theory metaethics, right? You're actually not making a divine command theory metaethic claim at that point. You're making a benevolence is morally grounding claim. Any authority which made like benevolent commands would have moral grounding power just by the definition that they're making benevolent commands.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to strip it down to like a general, like sort of Christian or its general belief in God, then an ultimate being that we can call God that is good, that has goodness as its attributes, that could provide moral grounding power. If you did not have that, you could not be a grounding for morality. And the reason I say this is because this is about objective morality. If objective morality doesn't exist, then objective morality or objective obligations or whatever follow is a pointless discussion. But God's commandments are good because he is good, and he issues those commands that are inherently a reflection of his nature. And so that's where we get the moral obligations. But your gain, like the point that you're making is that you're trying to turn, like, we don't have objective morality if you posit the God, the Yad that you say.
I don't see the asymmetry between the two
Yod
cases.
doesn't have moral grounding power because Yod is not benevolent by our lights, right? Then God wouldn't have moral grounding power either, just because he is God and omnipotent. All you're saying is that the property which makes something moral is benevolence, which is basically saying the thing that makes something moral is that it's moral. Like this is why the Euthyphro problem is still a problem, and why appealing to his being loving is irrelevant, is because the implication of claiming divine command metaethics, which involves God just having moral grounding power, is something which you actually aren't defending, because you know you can't. You're retreating to, well, it's because he's benevolent and loving, and that doesn't work as a defense of divine command metaethics. Now, you can take a divine command stance normatively. You can say, look, it is the case that God is benevolent, and we should follow God's benevolent commands, but it doesn't get you to the idea that that's like the metaethic grounding of morality itself. So here's what I would suggest to you. If you want to do some more research into this and tell me what you think, we could talk again. But you'll find that many Christians do not defend divine command metaethics. They defend something like divine command normativity. So they say, like, well, you can't really justify divine command metaethics because that would lead to conclusions like Yod could be morally grounding, that the ethical thing is always to ground children. But since God would never do that, it's not the case that it is just grounded in a command. It is the case that some other kind of metaethic is the best way to understand what morals are, and that God is the supreme authority within that different metaethic. I don't think you should assume, or that any Christian should assume, that they're bound to what people call divine command metaethics, and that's the only way to do Christian ethics. And if I were you, I would look into other views that even Christians take to see that you're not actually obliged to this position just because you want to be a good Christian.
Well, so I mean, I'll turn it on you then. What is the grounding for objective morality and objective moral obligations?
I'm not sure they exist, but I don't have a problem with that. You have a problem
okay,
with
well,
it. It scares you.
Yeah, well, that's the.
But
that's the point, is that you don't have them, and so anybody.
We don't.
Do you have no?
Need them.
You have no grounding for critiquing.
It's not necessary. It's not necessary.
Let me let me finish. Okay, so saying I'm not sure they exist isn't the same thing as saying like they can't exist or whatever. You know, like I know a number of objections to various claims about objective morality. However, it has very little bearing on my pragmatic use of morals or judgments of other people's morals. I can tell you my personal sort of meta-ethical position is quasi-realism, and if you want to look it up, it's a guy named Blackburn. He's basically saying that people speak in moral realist terms because it's kind of like a natural teleological tendency in our language in general to ascribe everything in a slightly exaggerated sense of realism or purpose. When in fact, what we're trying to say is that there is some real situation which we can agree on, the circumstance, and there are judgments that we arrive at based on that circumstance, which are not like moral realist claims, but it's natural to use the moral realist language, and we all understand what we mean by it. The same way that biologists can say the jungle created or the jungle designed the bee to pollinate the flowers, right? They don't literally mean there's a designer called the jungle that did it, nor do I literally mean that moral realism has to be the case to say something like what you did was wrong, and here's why, right? So
Yeah,
I
but
think
it's you can't like no like first is that nobody lives like that. Nobody lives like moral obligations and moral objectivity is like you might say that you don't think that they exist, but people like human beings act as if in the same way that we condemn societies that brutally murder and cause genocide or democide and things like that. But basically, the thing is that your worldview provides very little grounding for critiquing other sorts of societies, except for reference to your own normative ethics, in which other societies do not care about your normative ethics, and so they operate based on a different form of ethics that justifies their own position. So the Nazis believed, and the Nazis actually based a lot of their genocide on like evolutionary biology and the kind of evolution of the race and elimination of the weaker
I
species and things
misunderstood
like
and
that.
disagreed
But
with the founders of the sciences in the question. But anyway,
yeah, but
it's
the
not a
point is that
that's
the
fine.
point is that you can't like
I'm not
you
done.
all we have is just a subset of everybody makes up their own sense of morals. The purpose of objective morality, and I think that this is the point that TJump probably would want and ideally would want is an objective grounding so that all societies there is an objective right or wrong for in a society. So a Nazi or a Marxist society are objectively wrong because they don't cohere with the objective morality. But you're saying that they don't exist. And so your system allows for all these terrible societies, and there's no way you can critique them.
There is a way we can critique them.
Yeah,
There
and
are
secondly, like a lot of these societies do what they do in the name of God, and many terrible societies have existed that justify their entire terrible program on
Neither of
the
them.
divine command that they assert. So let me
Soviet
just
Union,
respond.
Mao's China,
Aslan.
Nazi Germany are not Christian.
Aslan, let me talk. Okay, so what I'm saying is that look, I agree with people all the time who makes statements that sound like moral prescriptions. Now, why I agree might differ from why they are making the statement. Like someone who is a Christian might say, murder is wrong because God commanded us not to murder, right? Now, if I agree with them that murder is wrong, in fact, I think it's just that's how the word murder is defined by killing. It's kind of like a vacuous statement to say murder is wrong. You're just saying unjustified killing is unjustified, basically. But I'll agree with them. The reasons for it are different.
That's not it. It's the reason murder is wrong is because it turns us away from God.
Sure. So the reasons that you're gonna just cite it are gonna be slightly different than the reasons another Christian is gonna cite it. They're gonna use slightly different words, right? But we're gonna be able to still use it pragmatically and have a society where we are able to establish a working system of morals. Now, I happen to think that morals improve with time historically so far, in general, and that we're going to need to rely on constantly reevaluating and justifying and reconsidering and improving our systems, because the systems in the past were inferior to those we have now. And I don't know what the perfect meta-ethical way to ground it all is. I don't know if it can be defined in an objective way or not, and I'm open to that. I think it'd be great if we could figure out a way to define it objectively. But I
got
don't
a
care.
question.
And what you have is you have like a subjective attachment to the idea that until you can say that it's objective, it just can't be the right system or a workable system, which I just don't share. And I don't think anyone who is trying to do the best that they can and accepts that everyone else is also trying to do the best that they can and is willing to talk about it and like negotiate and sort of have a contractual world in which we actually live in is worried about whether or not it's all absolutely objective in
So
order
I
to
got
be
a
able
question.
to do so.
So,
Go ahead, TJump.
so say there's two universes, one in which murder moves you further away from God, and one in which murder where it doesn't move you further away from God. Is murder worse or not wrong in one of the universes?
It's a weird hypothetical, but I guess, like, for example, if we were murdering serial killers or murdering child rapists, then that would be good.
No, just murdering a random old lady on the street. So there's old lady on the street in both universes. She's done nothing wrong. You murder her in both universes, but in one universe, murdering people moves you away from God, and in the other one, it doesn't.
It's not even. It can't be like that because
God
God doesn't change.
There's no logical contradiction. So in one universe, either there is no God or God is different in some way. Doesn't make a difference. Murdering people does not move you away from God in this universe. Does that mean the murder is less wrong?
So the reason why your question sounds weird is because it's sort of like asking, like, is murder ethical? And like in this world, murder is ethical. In this world, murder is not ethical. Is it ethical? And it's like, yeah, in the world where murdering somebody like randomly turns you away from God, it turns you away from God. And if it does turn you towards God, it would move you towards God. But that's like we don't believe that world exists.
I feel like this is really easy. I mean, just like world A, you kill a baby and there's a God. World B, it's a no God world and you kill a baby. Like, did you do anything wrong in the no God world?
Yeah, well, no, it's in that's the atheist framework.
Well, I'm asking, killing a baby in that case, did it get diminished? Did the action and the consequence get diminished in the no God world?
Well, it's not like you're talking about like the external what actually happened. That's just the description. Like I'm talking about whether or not evaluation of that ethic.
I'm not trying to be rude, but I am looking for like a yes or no, and then you could elucidate further if you'd like. But
I mean, yes, there would be a difference.
Oh, well, yeah, would it still be bad?
If you believe. I'm
just asking you what you think.
Oh, if there was no God, then it wouldn't be wrong.
So in our worldview, God makes no difference. It's equally as wrong to kill a baby in world A as it is to kill a baby in world B. The God makes zero difference. So we're comparing models here. Our model says that the wrongness has something to do with killing the baby, and the God just literally doesn't matter. And yours says, oh, no, you need the God in some relation to the God to make it good. So it seems like your model is just wrong, and because it can't assess moral situations unless the Sky Daddy is there. Whereas our model is much more. Wait. So our model is much more capable to assess what is right and wrong, because we can say, oh, look, a universe with no God, killing a baby is still wrong because the wrongness has something to do with the baby, not the God.
Yeah.
No,
exactly. In our models, we're accounting for the victim. In your model, you don't give a shit about the victim. That's the point, right?
What do you? Of course you give. Of course,
no, you don't. I mean, you revoke that it ought not to be done when you say it's not moral, right? So
wait, no. This is the point.
Not an expression of like something that guides you towards.
If God exists and I want to kill a baby, I am objectively wrong. If God does not exist in that world and I want to kill a baby, that's my opinion. That's what I want to do. Then I can do whatever I want. There's no objective wrongness to it because it's just difference of opinion.
I didn't ask for objective wrong. I just asked if you thought it was wrong. I mean, clearly in that world, like there's no God and it doesn't.
Oh, you're asking me personally?
Yeah, because I'm trying to see if you can. Well,
forget the personal stuff. In your model, in the way you understand morality, if there's no God, then killing a baby isn't wrong. That's what you think. That's your model.
Well, so I would get us to the point where we both agree. We both agree in objective morality.
Yeah, I'm a moral realist. I believe in objective morality.
I know,
but
exactly.
Your brain, what you think is that if there's no God, killing a baby isn't wrong.
So the discussion is, if there is no God, there is no objective morality. That's my point.
Right.
You're
So-
saying that
so
there is an
you
objective
think-
morality outside of God.
Yes, because God-based morality is dumb as shit. But my question is do you think if there is no God, killing a baby isn't wrong?
I personally, if you're asking me personally, yes, I think it would be wrong, but that's because I believe in objective morality.
No, I'm asking
but
if you do not
asking about
believe in a God,
objectively
no
wrong.
God. If there is no God,
Are you asking?
would it be wrong to
objectively, it wouldn't
kill
be
a
wrong.
baby?
If there was no God, it wouldn't objectively be wrong to kill a
Right.
baby.
There you go. So this is why your model is garbage.
No, because my model believes in God.
Asline, it's also problematic because in your model, if God commanded you to kill that baby, then it would be good.
Only if you believe that that's possible, but it's logically
in
impossible.
your worldview, it is possible.
What's
God can
okay? Well, hold
command
on, hold
you to
on.
do
What's
something.
the contradiction, right? Because like if you say it can't happen, I take that as some type of modal expression, and you're saying, and you've identified it as being logical. So like, what's the proposition in the
The Ten
conjunction of its
Commandments say not to
negation?
murder.
Unless God is commanding you to
Oh
do
wait, hold
something.
on. I'm looking for like P and not P. So like, and I can negate it for you. So like, what is it?
What do you want?
If so if someone says that that can't happen, right, or it's impossible, I take that to be some type of expression of like modality where like, say it's a nomological impossibility or a logical impossibility, but you identified it as it being logically impossible.
Yeah.
So now like the only thing that you should do given the claim is to deliver P and not P, right? The proposition and the conjunction of its
premise
negation.
one would be God is good. God is essentially good. Premise two, murdering babies or whatever is evil. Therefore God cannot kill babies or kill torture baby or whatever the hell the phrase is.
That's not not a logical contradiction. So a logical contradiction means like
Yeah, it
you are a
is.
round square. That's what a logical contradiction means. Like a round square. It's like saying that I choose not to do something. Like it's not impossible for me to choose to eat chocolate ice cream. Like I may not even choose it. Someone could force me to eat chocolate ice cream, or it could happen by chance. So it's not a logical contradiction that I don't eat chocolate ice cream, even if I hate it, even if I'm completely contrary to it. It's not a logical contradiction.
Yeah. So like, for example, if you're divorcing the concept of God from a Christian God, then yeah, evil God is not a contradiction. But if you're talking about Christian God, an evil Christian God is a contradiction, because the essential in the definition of Christian God is that God is essentially good, and so it is a contradiction in that worldview.
It's not a contradiction.
I have
Sorry,
something
go
I have something I want to run by you, Asline. It's kind of the heart of this whole thing. And Euthyphro dilemma aside, problem of evil aside. Okay, so all of this, your entire position is predicated on the fact that God is defined in a particular way, right?
So I hate it being phrased like that, because the point is that no, we make an inference based off our lived experience to make an inference to God being the standard. We're not saying that we just definitionally make it and therefore that's why we believe it. We say that objective good exists.
He's saying it's synthetically known, not just like an analytic definition.
Yeah, it's like
Exactly.
okay. So I'm asking you, is like, because God is this way, is defined in this way, that this is the way things are. This is your whole thing is predicated on God being defined in a particular way. Okay, that God has these attributes, God is this, God is that, and that's why that my whole worldview is predicated upon this. I'm asking, so that leads to the question: how did you determine that the God of your worldview is defined this way, and you know this to be true?
Because we have in our world, we believe, like, if you're like me and TJump both believe in objective morality, where's the location? How do you have an objective morality without an objective standard? I say that objective standard must be God, and so God's properties must be essentially good, and we're making a reference to that. And so like the way that I would put it is that if I didn't believe in objective morality, I wouldn't believe that God was good.
Let me put it this way. Let's say I want my God to be made of spaghetti, and I say, you know what? It's in my God's nature to like spaghetti, and so it's a logical contradiction for it not to be made of spaghetti. Does that make sense?
No, it's not, because there's no inference from the existing world that God is a spaghetti.
Well, the inference is that I like spaghetti.
Okay.
So I
How
have an
does
inference.
what is the logical argument that because you like spaghetti, God has to also be spaghetti?
I have this intuition that God is made of spaghetti, therefore it must be the case that it's logically impossible he's not made of spaghetti.
Okay, then your God can be spaghetti.
So, Asline, my question was going to your methodology. How did you determine that the definition that you hold of God is true? And I'll even go a little bit further. And how did you eliminate the possibility that the definition you have is not a deception?
Because and this kind of gets into
how
the
did you eliminate
transcendental.
that it is a deception? How did you eliminate that it could be a deception? How did you eliminate that possibility?
Because a deceptive God would not provide the grounding for objective morality. If God was deceptive, then morality wouldn't exist, because everything that we see, like God wouldn't be good if he was deceptive.
Incorrect. Subjective, just because morality is subjective doesn't mean morality doesn't exist. It just means it's subjective to determination.
No, well, you're talking about if God could lie, and
yes.
my argument.
How did you eliminate the possibility that God lied from the very start?
So, like, you would take a look at what that worldview would produce. If there's a God that lies, then we would not have objective morality. We would not have a grounding for anything.
You're right. We would have subjective morality. It'd be subjective. It like I said, Euthyphro dilemma. It's already subjective. It's either subjective to God or it's subjective to us, because God is an agent.
But I believe
TJump
in
was saying
objective
earlier.
morality.
Okay, so I'm saying what I'm trying to get is this: everything you know about God's nature, everything that is derived from God's nature, stems from one singular source. And then you take that source and then you extrapolate it to the world that you observe. Okay? Because the God that you're describing cannot be extrapolated from the observations of the universe. So you need a grounding source, and that grounding source is your Bible.
So, okay. I mean, I would say me and TJump are basically doing the same thing, except I'm just taking it a little bit further and saying, where does that objective morality come from? And I think it comes from God.
Okay.
Well, it's worse than that, because it's any observation is going to be consistent with that type of a being, right? I mean, like, especially if it's omnipotent or something like that. Like, I mean, interesting. Just like think about different people that disagree on their notions of God, right? Like any observation of the world is consistent with like any antithetical notion that you have of God, or even kind of close. Maybe one property is different or something like that. So like, I don't really, right? That doesn't. It just seems that like with the deception part of it, what it's going to mean is for it to be a successful deception is everything you're saying is going to be the tools that you cite in some possible world where you're actually deceived. So like, I don't really know how.
That's all we have. Like all we have is what we can.
Just
what we
all
can
those
experience in
inferences
this
are going to
world.
be consistent with other views, right? And so you have to have something that like actually could separate that view. But the problem is, like, when you're assessing the type of being God is, like, all of the observations you make are going to be like, even if we take the deception thing out, it's like any observation you make, whether it's from text or whether he speaks to you or something like that, you're going to have to assess what's consistent with that God's intentions. But it's seemingly like any type of interpretation is just going to be consistent with whatever you deem it to be, right? So I'm not really sure. Like, it seems like when you're defining these things, right, like analytically, I don't really know what the synthetic inference that's being used or what identification in the world you're using. But it seems that it's like if I created an argument, like atheist arguments always win by definition, so therefore my argument wins, right? It just, that's kind of seems like the move that you're making. It's like we're playing a deal with a dealer who just knows the cards.
Just to break it down really simply, it's the same logic that I'm using is like when you go into a table and you see a watch, you assume that watch was created by a person. You don't assume that the watch just appeared out of nowhere.
Yes, but
my argument,
a watch and the universe are not analogous.
No,
and I don't want to get off topic.
I
don't want to get off topic. I don't want to dive into the watchmaker fallacy, because then we have to get into Hume.
Yeah, that's my bad, JL. I kind of interrupted you, so that's
okay.
Bad.
Just what I want to jump to is this: if God is defined in any other particular way, then your worldview falls apart. Your worldview is predicated on God being defined in a particular way. My question then becomes: how did you derive that particular definition? Because when making basic observations, with just observations alone, your God, as it is defined, cannot be logically extrapolated from what we observe. Okay, just from basic observations of reality, your God, as you've defined it, can't be logically extrapolated. So we need something else to extrapolate it from. And where you extrapolate that from, everything you know about the nature of this entity is from either what you've been told in your faith or from the Bible in and of itself. Okay?
Yeah,
So
that's a
you're
straw
predicating
man.
all of this that God is, so all of this is dependent upon God being defined in one very particular way. And I'm asking you, how did you, by what methodology did you determine that God is in fact defined in this manner, and eliminate the possibility that God lied, that God is deceiving us? Because if God has the power to do so, is sufficiently powerful enough, then how would you know the difference between a God that's lying to you and a God that's telling you the truth? If God says it's good, because you derive, because in essence it comes from this. The Bible is, in your worldview, the inspired word of God, or the breathed word of God, written down by
before
man.
we get into that, can I answer your question? So here's the quick and easy breakdown is that if objective morality exists, then they must be a reference, and that reference, I'm making an inference that God is that reference because he's the ultimate standard and that his essential attributes are good. Now, if you take that objective morality exists, but God, like the God that you're making reference to, is a lying God and is not good, then you can't have it based on him because he's not good, and there's no reference of like evil good, the evil good spectrum, because God does not provide that reference.
I'm asking you how you eliminated the possibility. I'm asking you how you were able to ground the fact that God is this way, and how did you eliminate the possibility that's another way? Because how can you tell the difference between a God that says it's good and a God that's lying to you and saying that it's good?
Because of the impossibility of knowledge. If God was a lying God and a deceptive God, then we would not have grounding for a lot of the, like, namely morals and objective morality, but also everything else in the world.
No,
every
that's
immaterial
saying
object in the world.
that a liar can never tell the truth.
No, like the point is that if a God lied, that God would not be ultimately good because lying is evil.
Can we discuss immaterial now, since you brought that up again?
Well,
It's the same thing, but and this is the point that we got into last time with TJump, and I think I've kind of clarified it a little bit. But basically the crux of it is that TJump doesn't agree that immaterial objects exist, although he does believe that objective morality exists. But he basically purports to a form of nominalism in which the terms and concepts and things that we use are a reference or constructs of things that we apprehend in the objective reality. My point would be that those things can't exist just in your mind. They also exist in the reality, but they're not called that thing. So when we see like three objects in the world, like we're calling it three, but we are also apprehending the objective reality of three. And that concept therefore exists in the world, but where is the grounding for that? That's not something that you can explain with nominalism.
Well, hold on. Is his claim, are you getting some like divine conceptualism? Are you saying that the concept is grounded in God's thoughts?
Yeah, but that's not. I don't have to go to that.
You know that entails like an infinite regress, right?
No, because God is the ultimate standard.
Well, just think about it. Think about what's the content of like 2 + 2 = 4, right? You're saying it's God's thought, right?
Yeah, the system of logic and mathematics.
Yeah, so it seems like you're going to get this weird regression of like God believes X, which is 2 + 2 = 4, which is the thought, which will be like God believes that he believes that X, right? You're going to get this really weird regression, it seems like, if you take that route.
Hang on a second, Aslan. Do the laws of logic adhere to
Also,
God?
I recognize that I have to take a lot of time, by the way.
Aslan, do the
you
laws
guys
of
want to
logic
kick me out? Then.
do the laws of logic do the laws of logic apply to God, or is God outside the laws of logic?
God is the source of laws of logic.
But do they apply to
They're
him?
grounded in his nature.
Hang on. But do they apply to him?
That's a misnomer, because
it's not
if
a
they
misnomer,
apply to
because
him,
the minute you state that it's not, because the minute you state a thing exists, you automatically invoke the law of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle. The minute you say that this thing is a thing that exists, that it is God and it is not God, The minute you do that, you automatically invoke the classical laws of logic. So I'm asking you, do the laws of logic apply to God, since you've stated it exists? Do they apply to God, or is God outside of them?
That's predicated on logic being external to God. Logic is a property of God,
That's what
and
I'm
therefore
asking.
he
No,
lives
that's
by
what I'm
logic.
asking you. No, that's what I'm asking you. Is God outside the laws of logic, or do the laws of logic apply to God as well?
No.
Yes or no?
The laws of logic are God's essential properties, are one of God's essential properties.
Asline, but do they apply to God? Because you've invoked them by stating God exists.
That question doesn't make sense, because if it
It
is
does make
a part
sense.
of
It does
him,
make
then they
sense. The
don't
laws of
apply
logic
to
apply
him.
to no, Asline. It does make sense. The laws of logic apply to God. God is God, and God is not God. Okay, so the law of identity.
Ask it as a question. Jill, ask him, does God exist?
Does God exist? Okay, Asline, does God exist?
Yes.
Okay.
Does he not exist?
Does he not exist? Is that, yeah, he does exist.
So he can't both exist and not exist at the same time, right?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes. He cannot exist and not exist at the same time.
Which means the laws of logic apply to God.
No, it's because he is the grounding for he is logic. Or his essence is logic. You think this is like this big refutation. It's not that.
Asline, you're not getting it. And I don't know. I
understand
why
what
you're
your
not
point
getting
is.
it. Either the laws of
you're
logic,
not getting the fact that it's not external to God.
Either the laws of logic apply to God, which you state when you state that God exists, and that he does not exist. Okay? Either the laws of logic apply to God, which means that God cannot exist and not exist simultaneously. Okay? Because the laws of logic apply to him. Or God exists external to the laws of logic, and the laws of logic are merely his nature, but they don't apply to him because he is the source of them, but they hold no sway over him himself. They don't apply to him, but they apply to everything that he creates. Okay?
So God cannot be illogical. That's the point.
But okay, that means that the laws of logic supersede God. God cannot operate outside of the laws of logic.
No, it's his property. It's the same thing as the goodness thing, is that God is good, therefore he can't do evil.
Well, that's problematic in and of itself, because that's just simply because you've arbitrarily defined God as being good, which you can't determine if that is true in any way. Because
I don't think you're following the argument.
I'm saying it's completely irrelevant. What I'm saying, Asline, is either the laws of logic apply to God or they don't. It's a true dichotomy. They either apply to God or they do not apply to God. And if they apply to God, then the laws of logic supersede God, and God is merely appealing to the laws of logic because God can't do otherwise. God can't make a one-ended stick or a square circle. But if they supersede God, then we only need appeal to the laws of logic. But if God is outside of them, then God is in itself definitionally a logical contradiction. God can both exist and not exist simultaneously. God, and therefore both positions are justified, which is incoherent. So it's one or the other. It's either God is arbitrary to the laws of logic, we can just appeal to the laws of logic, or God does not exist. There is no middle ground on this. That's why the question is, do the laws of logic apply to God, or do they not apply to God? True dichotomy.
They apply to God because they're his essence. Randolph, do you guys want to move on, or does anyone else want to ask me a question, or because we can kind of go whatever?
Well, we have taken quite a lot of time. I think it's important that we try to cover different topics and bring other people up on the stage who'd like to be here. So I'm just going to, I see J Mike for some reason got caught in the audience. He might have something to say, so hang on a second.
And Aslan, I would like to talk after you've had a chance to look at some different Christian positions other than your own, and see that there are some options that you have to move around that don't.
Oh no, I mean I have. It's just that, yeah. Like here, here's what I'll do. I'll look at your. Here's what I'll do. I'll look at your syllogism and I'll write up the response to it and I'll send it to you, and then that way
You
can
need
take a
to
look
read
at it.
more than the syllogism. That's just like a tiny piece of the overall argument, right?
I know, but I mean,
read the paper, and look at what some of the other Christians have concluded who don't hold to divine command metaethics. They still hold to the idea of divine commands, but normatively. And I wanted to respond just briefly to something you said earlier, right? So you said that that you and TJump agree partly in that you both believe that there is something that exists, which is what we're referring to when we say like moral obligations exist in a moral realist sense, right? Now, I think that there are many things where we can say that structural sort of like structural emergent properties exist from some premises. So like math, if you formulate the numbers and then you follow from your formulation of the numbers, you can derive all of the principles of mathematics. If we look at another field, which is game theory, which is a kind of an application of mathematics to players of a game where they can compete with one another or cooperate with one another in a variety of different types of scenarios where they're variously at odds with each other or able to help each other. We can say that in game theory, point to certain strategies which are called Nash equilibriums, and we can say that like these are strategies where, you know, if you follow this strategy, you're going to more often than not win out against those who are defecting or operating against the group of people following the strategy, such that they'll be able to overcome and defend themselves against that defecting strategy, right? Now, we could talk about that conceptually as an abstraction that's analogous to some of the situations we find ourselves in morally, or we have basic choices, right? If everyone is trying to be whatever they think benevolent means to each other, they're going to get along well and be successful as a team and cooperate. If people are trying to defect and cheat each other or kill each other just to get more power for themselves, there's going to be consequences of that which we don't consider to be benevolent a lot of the time, and so on. So it may be the case that the best way of conceptualizing the part of this which seems real, the part of this which seems like it would be true in any possible universe or something like that, is this concept of the math essentially that comes from cooperation and defection tendencies in the competition. And I think if you look at The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, and you look at the idea of kin-selective altruism, which says basically like from the gene's eye view, the gene will get copied whether you or I reproduce. Either way, if we have the same gene, that gene is going to be successful, right? This is going to mean that I'll sacrifice my life to defend you, and you'll sacrifice your life to defend me, because what we're really doing is we're following a gene which says sacrifice yourself, and it has the consequence of keeping more copies of itself in existence such that it pervades the gene pool. Kin-selective altruism is a winning game theory in biological form, right? And I think that descriptively at least is the starting point for why we have morality, why we think it's so important, and why we're willing to get into very heated arguments about trying to get it right. And maybe you don't agree that this could be the explanation for why morality exists in the first place, or maybe you think that even if it is the correct explanation for where it came from, satisfactory philosophical position, because it doesn't get you to some objective claims about what is or isn't always right in possible situations. But I would at least look at and consider it as a different way of starting to examine morality.
Yeah, and I would just say that that probably causes a lot of problems for you too, because when we think of things like rape and murder and dominance and tribalism, we don't think that those are good things, but those are biological outgrowths, and like nationalism and things like that. I don't think you would hold to that. Those things are just is, and that's
Yeah,
what
we agree
we
about
should
that.
live our.
I'm just to be clear.
Well, that's my point. Is that there
I'm
needs to
not
be more
appealing
than
to
that.
nature. So this is not the same thing as an appeal to nature fallacy. I'm not saying whatever's natural is good, right? And if you look at Darwin, right, what he said was, I don't have the quote in front of me, but he said basically, look, the genius of humankind is that we don't do whatever we're evolved to do blindly, and instead we adopt a cultural tendency towards greater benevolence than our genes equip us for. And what he was saying is that obviously this isn't like the last word on morality. It just explains the behavior of animals, basically. But when we look at human beings, we look at a culture that developed amongst human beings of tending for the sick, so they don't die off, even if that means that they get to have kids. Because we're not after some like eugenic, like genes makes right kind of world. You attributed Nazism to evolutionary theory, but if you read Darwin, you wouldn't come to the conclusions of Nazism, right? What you're getting when you think about this is an explanation of where it started, but it's not the endpoint or the final template for how it should be, right? But what it does explain is why is it the case that we have morality? Where did it arise from? And how can we improve it beyond that is an open question that we have to work out amongst ourselves. And I don't think it particularly matters what meta ethic we adopt, although I think it's very interesting and it would be great to come to more agreement on that. Right now, the field of meta ethics is like deeply divided between all sorts of camps. But normative ethics goes on as though that's not a problem because we all have a pragmatic need to contractualize a more benevolent world where we can get along better with each other. And it doesn't rely on an objective claim.
Yeah, and the only my last point that I'll say on that is that I think the problem with, yes, there is this agreement on meta ethics, but there is an urgent need for having objective grounding because if you read postmodernism posits that kind of everything, all the knowledge claims and things that we have are predicated on the kind of starting points or whatever that we choose, and those starting points are guided by power relations and certain things like that. And so you can have an outgrowth of an infinite number of interpretations of certain things. And the thing is, that's what leads to certain people having their own form of ethics that is internally consistent based on their own subjective grounding. I think that all of us would probably agree that we don't want societies to move towards that direction of just infinite interpretations. We want to have a society that is progressing towards a telos or progressing towards the objective reality. And I think that if you deny the objectivity of things like morality and things like that, you really have no guard against that.
Well, I agree with you in part. I just
I
let me
say
finish.
the difficulty is in finding a middle ground up there because morality is subjected to the person, subjected to the group, subjected to the nation, subjected to the country, subjected to the planet. The difficulty is in finding a middle ground middle ground that we can all agree on. That's all it is.
Okay, so it's a very subtle point, right? But what you're saying is, like, look, we want to get closer and closer to what you call objective morality. Now, I partly agree. And what I was trying to say before about quasi-realism is I think that the amount of what we're saying when we make moral statements that is real should approach as close to one as possible, right? We want to have as much of our moral statements to be grounded in real facts about the world, so that when we do make the subjective kind of judgments about value, that they're based on precedents that seem warranted and not just like, well, these people have decided to eat babies or something. But what I think is that as though that is a goal, kind of like a lot of things where you strive towards some kind of perfection, but you can't actually define an end state, because it may be the case that when you get to what you think is a big improvement over your past way of doing things, there's still an improvement beyond that. So we would agree that we want to have a more grounded and more objective basis for our moral claims. I just don't think that asserting that there is like one final system has a good track record or a good prospect for being arrived at. Even though I agree that, like in the case of game theory, there are mathematical underpinnings for why benevolence is a winning strategy and why humans and basically every other cooperative species, whether you're talking about ants or pack animals like dogs and so on, why they succeed because of their benevolence towards each other and so on, and they're willing to sacrifice for each other. So I think that's like a real thing about the world. It is a winning strategy mathematically. And I think we're all just trying to figure out what's the most benevolent strategy. There is a math underlying it that's true, and that's what we're trying to approximate with our real messy moral systems.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think like I want to at least believe that all of us are kind of on the same page of wanting to move towards that objective reality, kind of more in tune with the objective morality.
More
but
objective,
the Christian,
even if it's impossible to get all the way. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Christian, like it's not like the Christians don't just like don't just like fear away from this sort of postmodern realist, like postmodern world or whatever. It's that we just can't see a way in which you can ground these objective things in things other than a God. And so it's not that like we just reject, like emotionally reject all these systems. We just don't, we know, like all of us, I think, or maybe not, but all of us kind of in our heart of hearts knows that there's some sort of objective morality. Maybe not, but I think then we kind of have to question what systems would allow for that. And if you don't have a system that allows for that, then you kind of, you go into the sort of confluence of millions and millions of But anyways, I'm just restating.
No, I think it's a
basically.
really good point, and this gets to what I think almost always underlies all the conversations I have with Christians, whether they're precept or not, which is that the way that you think justification works, and like the way that you feel about the trilemma of basically like, infinitism, foundationalism, coherentism, tends to underpin like what kind of system you gravitate towards. And what you're saying is you like to have a foundationalist system that has a starting point that guarantees all the conclusions are correct that are based off of that, right? That would be God.
Yeah, like a
Okay.
coherentist system.
Well, it sounds like you like foundationalism. You want God to be the foundation. Everything builds up from God because it's just like a manifestation of God's nature, right?
Well, so I mean, I'm kind of split on whether or not I'm a foundationalist or a coherentist because I do agree with presuppositionalism that at root everything is circular,
Okay.
and so I'm
So,
not fully sure.
okay, I would look at Hack's found herentism, which is a very simple analogy to look at, which is basically a crossword analogy, right? So, unlike foundationalism, which claims there's one point that guarantees everything after it, or coherentism, which just says there's just a web, or infinitism, which says you just keep asking more questions or something and making more justifications. What found herentism is saying is you have a crossword. So there are things that deductively rule other things out. Like you can't have a square circle. There are things that contradict, which is similar to like the ideas of Karl Popper and like critical rationalism, where he was basically saying, we can deductively rule certain things out and keep trying to do that and eliminating errors to get closer and closer to approximations of scientific realism or something, right? But what you're admitting when you do the crossword puzzle, when you don't have the whole puzzle all of the time, and there are ones which you still haven't been able to solve, is that it is possible, but unlikely, that something you discover in one of the harder to fill in gaps is going to make you reconsider a bunch of other things. So it's like, instead of starting with I think, therefore I am, or something like that, which I think is only partly right, I can say I think, therefore I probably am, but I could be convinced that I'm not thinking, and that there's something else is but I could work around it and come up with a new picture of reality that would work better. But it would have to not contradict the things that I'm most confident about, and it would have to make allowances for discovering things which might get me to reconsider things I currently believe.
Yeah,
But
that's
what
the
this
role of
means,
faith, though, is that
well,
every system
sure,
is always going to have its own uncertainty, and so every
yeah,
system relies on some form of like leap between
Ah,
what is currently known and what isn't known.
finally,
right.
finally got to the point that I finally got to
I'm
the
saying
point that I
all
was
of us
trying to
are
get to.
faith.
No, sir. There is a difference between faith and trust, and faith and confidence. Okay, faith is belief without evidence. Trust and confidence are sliding scales based upon the evidence and
Yeah,
what we have at hand. I trust a particular model because the model has been successful in the past. I will then lose trust in that model if that model begins to not be able to make appropriate predictions. And I will trust another model better if it makes better predictions that are more accurate. And then that model will have my trust. Trust and confidence are not synonymous with faith. And that is a
yeah.
huge, huge mistake. Okay?
Confidence proportion to evidence is different than
Yes.
just saying I just have no idea, I'm just going to guess, because it feels right or
Well,
it sounds good.
that's not what faith is. It's based off the preponderance of evidence, but recognizing that you can't fully know everything. So the skeptic would like the pure skeptic would not adhere to any sort of system unless it was 100% certain. I think nobody lives like that. Everybody
That's
lives off
that's not
high
true at all.
confidence, and then the faith takes us to that point where we accept it.
No, because I can accept something that's working at 95%, and I will accept the fact that there's a 5% margin for error.
I know, and you're taking that 5% that it won't work on faith.
No. Then I then establish a plan in the event that the 5% occurs and it fails. So I prepare for both. But I have a strong level of confidence because it has been successful in the past. It doesn't mean I don't prepare for the failure. Because if that 5% occurs, then I'm screwed. So I don't predicate anything on faith. I prepare for the eventuality despite my level of confidence. The skeptic says you can't be 100% confident on anything, so you need to prepare for the eventuality or the probability that it may not work out. But there is no 100%. Faith is 100% certain. Your entire position is predicated on the faith that you have that God is defined in the correct way. That's what I was initially trying to get at when I was talking to you previously, is that your entire position is predicated solely on the faith that God has defined himself for you through the Bible in the correct manner. Like you're understanding it correctly, or God is even being honest about itself. So this being comes along, supposedly creates everything, says, I'm all good, everything I do is good, I am the objective standard of all things, I'm the alpha and the omega, blah, 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 blah. It inspires human beings to write this down in a book, and you automatically assume that because it said these things, already begging the question of its own existence, but nonetheless, I digress, you then presume that God was telling the truth automatically about itself. What would preclude God, a sufficiently powerful enough entity, to lie to us to curry our favor and our love? What would stop it from doing that?
It's
Nothing.
not existing.
And how, not existing, this is true. How would you tell the difference between the two? You can't. There's no methodology for that. Okay? So the problem is your entire system is faith-based. The faith that you know for certain that God is defined in a particular way. Because like I said before, the God you describe and define cannot be logically extrapolated from the world we currently observe.
But what it does
Yeah,
resemble
I
is
just
a
think
Just Story.
it's just the
Like,
straw man.
It's
Aslan,
not
do
a
you know
straw
what
man.
here's the thing,
It's
all
not
of
a
us-
straw man, Aslan. It goes to the
Here's the thing,
very, very
Christians
heart
and
of your
atheists.
position. Aslan, it goes to the very heart of your position. I'm not worried about all the surface stuff in your worldview and how and how you just ignore the Euthyphro dilemma and how you just ignore the problem of evil. I'm not even worried about that. I'm worried about the whole thing that you predicate your position on is that God is defined in a very particular way, and you can't justify why you can't justify how
I
you
just think
know
it's-
that to be the truth.
I just
You
think it's
can't.
really dishonest when atheists try to proclaim that like Christians and atheists are like totally different in how they approach it. All of
They
us are
are.
trying to find the truth. All of us are trying to move towards the objective reality, and
But
you just
assume
claiming
you
that
haven't.
we just
You
make
assume
shit
you
up
have
is
it
just
by,
dishonest.
No, you assume you have it by claiming there's a God.
What? No, we all have uncertainty, but we just adhere, like we believe that the evidence points to a God. Atheist believes that it points to something else.
No,
but,
and we can
like,
point
it's
out
but
why
you're
your evidence.
invoking.
We can point out why your evidence is faulty. Why it's either contaminated by confirmation bias, or it's an argument from incredulity, or an appeal to emotion, or an argument from ignorance. We can point these out. You cannot point this out about us, about the atheist position. The atheist position is the logically honest conclusion based upon the evidence. And it makes no leaps. It accepts that we don't know certain things. It accepts that there are some things that we may never know. And it makes conclusions based upon the evidence at hand by using a methodology that eliminates our bias. Whereas you predicate everything upon the notion that this thing exists. You cannot demonstrate it to exist. And you've defined it in a particular way. You've essentially defined it into existence. And you've derived that definition from a book that is just completely arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean, if we're getting into this, I think I feel bad about taking up so much time. So I think.
Wait, no, Aslan, I wanted to ask you.
Closing.
I wanted to ask you one question before you went. I tried to hold off, so it might not be as
Sure.
relevant, like because it was far back. But you had talked about the laws of logic, and to JL's point that I think he's making in that case, maybe this is just something to think about. Maybe it's not relevant towards your position at all. But it seemed like you were saying that God wouldn't be confined to the laws of logic, and so here's one way to think about it. Like, if God can instantiate like some particular in the world, like an agent or something, we'll say like, he creates people. Well, like you'd probably agree with me that he can create people that go against his nature, right? Like liars or dishonest people. And presumably, if you think he's morally perfect, which is I think what you expressed earlier, you'd probably also agree that he creates people like me who are morally imperfect, right? So we don't have like any issue with God creating particulars or agents that are not that are antithetical to his nature. But then we get up to like this one question of like, can God create a one-ended stick or like a squared circle, right? And presumably he can't, right? And that just gives this, to me, it's a question to ask yourself of, well, what is the reason why God seemingly can go against his nature and create agents that aren't morally perfect, things like
Yeah.
that. But this one thing, he can't create a squared circle, right?
Yeah, I would just try to quickly respond. So the first thing is that I believe that God could create like automatons, like robots that just follow his will. I think that there's a reason that God created us with free will that have the ability to go against him. And that's part of divine hiddenness, that we can't know the exact reasons.
Well, I'm sorry
but
to
there are
interrupt.
some
But
things.
I'm actually not making a point to that. All I'm making a point is that God can create things, right? He can instantiate and actualize things in the world that
Well,
are
that's my second
contrary
point.
to his nature, right? So it's not a point of why that he does that. I'm granting that he can, and he can have his reasons. The reasons I'm not worried about in this case. All
Yeah,
I'm worried
well,
about
he
is
can.
the reason why he can't create a squared circle or me and not me at the same time, right?
So yeah, like so the reason like his creation of free agents is in line with his nature, and that those people can reject him. The second point about the squared circle and things like that, I would say I would question what my definition of all powerful is because does all powerful mean that they can do the logically impossible? I don't think it would fit within that framework. So I think that God is all powerful and he doesn't do what's logically inconsistent, but I think that actually makes him more good because, for example, somebody who is good
No, I'm
that
just
can
asking
commit
if
evil
he
is
can.
worse
I'm
than
not
somebody
asking
who
for
just can.
I'm not asking for like reasons of why he would or wouldn't, because that just presupposes that he could. And so you're just answering the question that he could create a squared circle, and in that case, like you have a different notion of omnipotence at that point, and that's fine. But it seemed like earlier you agreed on this point. So like feel free to change the position. But if it's the case that you think like that omnipotence is God being able to actualize any logically possible world, right? Or being able to do anything that's logically possible, then you have to ask yourself this question: when he can seemingly create all these agents with antithetical properties or properties that God does not possess, like moral imperfection or dishonesty, right? That why it's not the case that he can instantiate um, like a P and not P, right? Or X and not X, or a squared circle in some particular or some agent in the
Yeah,
world.
we
That
don't believe
seems
that.
just all that seems to do is show that God is he is subject to the laws of logic. He is not over and above them, right? So it
Right.
seems to me point out pretty obviously to JL's point that he would be confined by that. It's not like a trivial. It's not like, oh, I gotcha. It's just like to point out that you should probably take the God can actualize worlds that are logically possible, but don't make a move like he ground logic, because that doesn't make any sense, because clearly he doesn't. And two, we don't even know, like we have a problem of induction with God's nature. You don't know when you make these claims about God's nature. You have a problem of induction yourself. You don't know that God's nature has been revealed to you as X, but in reality it's Y. And you don't know that God couldn't just change his nature to Y tomorrow. And so like these
Yeah,
moves
so I
about
mean,
well,
we
hold on real
just
fast. These moves about grounding all this stuff in God in that case, seemingly it doesn't seem to be logical to ground those types of things when you in fact can't ground God's nature being X and it not turning to Y tomorrow, or that it was revealed Y and it was actually X, right? So I'm not really sure what like force your position even does.
Yeah, so I'll just try to make two real quick points. First is that I don't believe that God is like I don't believe in like the conception of God as just like an abstract entity that actualizes all his potentia, and that everything that is produced is necessarily like the fullness of good or anything like that. And then my second point is that I think that there are morally justifiable reasons as to why God would create human beings that had the capability of rejecting him and a world that that exist in. And one possible explanation is that the movement, the progression from evil to good produces more good than a world in which everybody is kind of just robots and doing nothing. I think we see that in our real world, in which we kind of see we admire the progression of like the hero's journey or whatever, where they're moving from kind of the evil place to a good place. We think that that is heroic and that's good, and I would say that that's a possible reason as to why God created it, so created the world so that their evil exists. But that's kind of all behind divine hiddenness. We don't know what like the purpose for all this stuff
That's
is,
going to
and we
be a
don't have
separate.
to.
But that's going to be a separate point. I'm not really interested. Honestly, that point gets worse in my opinion, because Like if you really think about God creating evil, right, for like significant free will, there's
He
like a
allows
lot of
evil.
there's a lot of problems. One, if you're going to invoke that it's required for free will, God himself is an agent that can only choose good. So I'm not seeing why that's not an issue for him, and it's also not an issue for like agents in heaven that can only choose the good, right? If you take that view. But more so, the bigger problem to what you're saying there, which is more relevant to what I was saying, but that if God does create a world like, the option to kill babies that go, like you said, goes away from God in that case, it just seems to be like all things considered a good thing, right? That the option even exists and that it should, because his plan it requires it to come into fruition. So I just don't even know like how someone in your view says that like something ought not to be done when what's constitutive of like evil being ought not done is not what God's doing. He's a being that can only do what ought be done, and he creates a scenario where we can choose what quote unquote you call evil. But that just, to me, that seems all things considered, like it's required for God's glory, right? So then it ought to be done. I don't just see how there's even evil in your worldview if you bite that horn. I think people refer to it as like a proto evil, right? It's strange to me. It's like that you could say like all things considered that there would be evil, given that it's required for. I mean, think about it, Pontius Pilate has to, commit some evil in order for like Jesus to die, right? I have to have sins in order for like Jesus to wash them away. It seems like constitutive of the worldview that these things aren't things that ought not be done, but they ought to be done.
Seems
Yeah, I
essentially
mean,
weird that
those are big questions.
a morally perfect being can create a scenario in which moral perfection is reduced. It's just weird
Yeah.
because if
I mean,
there's only
those are
God and God is morally perfect and God has not created anything, there's only God. So the state of everything is moral perfection. But then God creates something that reduces the moral perfection in the world, but that is antithetical to, that is literally a contradiction to God's nature. Because if God's nature is moral perfection, then anything it creates would follow that it would be morally perfect. But it creates a moral imperfection in the world and reduces the moral perfection of the universe by creating human beings, then that's logically contradictory. Not to mention, if denying God, creating agents that can reject God because it deliberately created us this way, and we can reject God, but to reject God entails punishment. But if we come to that conclusion honestly, if God were omnibenevolent, then there would be no punishment because we are free to choose. There wouldn't be a bad outcome or a good outcome. It would be, I came to the conclusion honestly, and I reject the notion because it's logically inconsistent. Then why am I being punished for coming to an honest conclusion if I had the right to choose? But I'm being then it's a punishment. That doesn't comport with omnibenevolence. So there's logical contradictions all over the place in what you're asserting, as line.
Yeah, I mean, these are all big questions that I think we ought to
Just
table.
think of the small question.
You can
If God
ask
is all
the next
good,
guy.
well, no, it's fair. I'm just saying, think about this. If God is all good, and maybe you can think of some response to this, right? I mean, it's just a question to ask yourself. If you take God to be all good, and you agree on, like that good is a normative notion, right? That it guides actions. Like good is something that we ought do, evil is something that we ought not do, right? Like I ought be in accord with God, I ought not be in accord with Satan or something like that. Like if me and you both agree on these normative notions of good and ought, even if I think being with Satan is the good thing, I'm still using it in a notion of like that ought to be done, right? So even if we have different kind of content to fill in about what ought be done, we're still using those notions the same, right?
We can have this conversation offline if you want. Like we can.
That'd be great. I'd love to. That'd be great.
sure.
Just message me on DMs. But ask yourself this question: If God,
I will.
if God is all good, that means He always does what ought to be done. And if you're saying He creates evil for like significant freedom or something, just think about what that entails, right? What logically follows that, because He only does things that ought to be done.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Aslan, I really enjoyed your previous conversation with us on the fact that when I said, hey, this is a really deep topic and it's a good idea to look into it some more, you did. You came back with a lot more familiarity. And like, I don't hold it against you. You didn't read the whole paper or whatever. These are long papers, but you're doing an excellent job, I think, of trying to explore and come to a position in an honest way. And it's very nice to talk to you. The last thing I just wanted to leave with is the idea of just so stories. That's my my homework suggestion. You don't have to take it. but I posted a link.
More
to,
home.
Yeah, sorry. I posted a link
No,
to
you're
just
good.
the stories in the chat. But basically, when I hear people say, evil is this way, and here's why God did it that way, and so on, it's like how did the tiger get its spots? Well, we can tell a story about how the world just appears to be to us, and we can try to come up with an explanation. But oftentimes, it's just like it's a ad hoc hypothesis to try to explain something in a way that all seems just internally consistent. But there's no real force to why that just so story is better than another just so story. So when we compare these different claims about morality, and one of the stories is, well, God arranged all this way on purpose. That's the way just so stories work, is it's all done on purpose. Like, this is how it had to be. But it's the alternative explanation that I started with, evolution worked a certain way such that the animals that cooperated were more successful than the animals that didn't, and we inherited a really strong set of cooperative genes. It may not satisfy all the questions philosophically or give you like a really complete system to ground everything in a foundationalist way that you'd like, but it has the advantage of being supported by immense evidence. And as many times we've had conversations which basically come down to, our story may not be satisfying, but it's based on evidence. And it seems descriptively true that that's how things got to be the way that they could be, because that's how things play out, not because someone had a plan for it.
I gotcha. And I'll just say is that like I do spend a lot of time reading. I do a lot of research on things, and I study a lot of different topics. And so if you want to kind of have a focused discussion, then you can kind of set the terms. And like if we want to keep a really narrow topic, if you want to have that sort of discussion, then you can set something up, and then I'll bring out my guns on that. That's something that'd be interesting.
Hasling, thank you very much. This was a really great conversation. It was very deep. You're very thoughtful, and it was. I think IX is pointing out something very important that you've done very well by researching the topic and coming back, and we appreciate you taking it so seriously.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks for
so
having me up. I'll move back.
Thank you, bud.
I wasn't aware tigers had spots.
All right, Concrete
Ligers.
Plus.
Ligers have spots.
Ligers have spots.
Sorry, I meant striped.
Calling you up, Concrete Plus.
Sorry, my boy over there.
I have a question.
My boy over there dodging the
from
swords
the
of
chat.
logical entailment like Matrix like Neo in the Matrix. Logical entailment.
I have a question from the chat. Jeff, are you awake?
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm here.
Jeff,
I've been listening.
Maya Atkinson heard some snoring, so people are wondering.
It wasn't me. I've been muted this whole time, so
Jefferson,
that was her imagination.
Jefferson is like the great Loa. It will speak when necessary.
Yeah. And Maya is one of the most loyal people coming to all of our stuff, so I thought it was just appropriate to just ask.
I've known her for a while online. She's justifiably concerned. If I'm quiet for a long time, odds are I've dozed off, sober or loaded. So
yeah, thank you, Maya Adkisson. Just it's important to mention their names. Concrete Plus. Concrete Plus, welcome back, and we'll give you your time to present your opening statement. Hopefully, you can keep with it in a few minutes for us, and then we'll respond accordingly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just deal with what Jay Mike was trying to put forward. He made a lot of claims that I don't think is actually borne out by the Christian God. Maybe he was appealing to another God. So I'll just start with that. Jay Mike, were you talking about the Christian God?
Which claim?
Were you talking about the Christian God when you were just talking to the last guy on stage?
Yeah, but what claim specifically? I know what you're talking about.
So you were talking about the Christian God? Okay, great. So when does the Christian God create evil?
What do you mean? When did he create it?
Yeah.
When isn't answered. The fact that he did is mentioned in the Bible.
All right, Jay Mike, what were you saying?
Well, yeah, I didn't know if you wanted some some like source in scripture or something, but I mean that's just going to be debatable on interpretation. So my point is that there wouldn't be evil in the Christian worldview if it ought to be done right for his glory. That's the whole point. There isn't evil. That was the whole point.
So the idea that evil, where do you get the idea that evil ought to be done?
I'm saying that he's a being that only does what ought to be done, right? And so in that set, or a member in that set is an action to create a world with agents with significant free will to choose against him. And that right there we have an action that God only does things that ought to be done. So it's just constitutive of the set to be something that ought to be done. But it's also
So where do you
required.
make?
It's also required for his glory. So there's
All
like a
right. So
purpose.
the claim that God only does what ought to be done. Where do you get that idea from?
I mean, you might not think he is omnibenevolent. In that case, it wouldn't apply to you. We'd like at least.
I don't think that's an entailment of omnibenevolence. So where do you get the idea? So is omnibenevolent? You
Do you
get the
think?
idea that he does what ought to be
Look.
done, and he only can do
Well, yeah. I
what
mean,
ought to be
look.
done.
Hold on. Do you think God is all good?
What does that mean?
Yeah, I can. He always does what ought. Do you take a normative notion of good? What ought be done?
I don't know what that means.
Look, either it's normative, and I know what you mean, or you're going to say something like it's descriptive, and I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So, do you take a normative notion of good, like it's the case that good is going to be like action guiding, right? Like with something we ought to or we ought not to.
I don't know anything that you're saying right now. Can you explain what you're talking
Yeah, I
about?
can. Yeah, of course. So like typically
So
when some
let's
people,
start with
it's
my
not the
question.
case for it's not the case for everybody. I think TJump might have pushed back because I think his view
Hold on. Look.
doesn't have normativity in it. But so like what I'm saying is like you can have kind of like two views, right? Either your account is normative or it's not. I don't really know. Like TJump's explained to me his view, so he's actually like elucidated to
I
it.
don't think he knows what
But if
normative
you
means. He's
don't,
asking like, what does normative mean?
I've talked. Okay. Oh wow, I've talked to him before. I thought he did. Normative is just going to be like action. Sorry, that's my bad.
Sorry.
It's just going to be like. So it's going to be like reference to some standard, right? So, it's going to guide actions towards like what you should do or what you should not do given the goal or whatever X is, right? You're going to have some notion of what array of things that you could possibly do that are going to achieve that goal. And in that
This
case,
sounds
like
like
you're like achieving that normative standard, so you're in accord with it, and therefore like you ought to do it. But if you're not, sorry, go ahead.
So it sounds like you have a sense of good that you understand, and you're superimposing or attributing that to God. And I'm
No, I
trying to
actually
ask you.
specifically asked.
Can I
I'm
finish
literally
what
making
I'm
the
saying?
distinction.
Can I just
Look,
finish what I'm
I'm
saying?
sorry. No, I know, concrete, but you're saying something that's just not true. I'm literally making a distinction and asking, like, if you don't take the normative notion of good there, that's fine. But I need to know what you mean because I don't know what the fuck that means. That's why I
So
like
when you
literally.
say normative, are you appealing to your standard of normative or God's standard of
Yeah,
normative?
well, yeah, I'm asking if they agree with that standard. That's the question. It's a question. You
I
don't
think
have
you're
to agree.
appealing.
Pull the cord off the bus stop. I don't know why
Look,
you're
so
refusing to that you have the
I'm
option.
trying to get you to try to communicate this from like let's say a theological point of view as opposed to a philosophical point of view.
Look, it's
Where
just,
when
do you
I
take
ask
a
you,
normative notion or
all
not? It's
right,
just it's a true dichotomy, yes or no.
yeah. So I think this is just a misunderstanding of my question or a misunderstanding of what I'm asking you. Or maybe you don't understand it. That's why I'm trying to like put it in different words. Maybe you can communicate in a different
Look,
way.
I can steel
Uh,
man what your objection is if you want me to.
I'm trying to get clarification, and then if I get clarification, then we can move on to objection. So
No,
initially,
I can
I
steel man
was
what you've said so far, which is why it's prompted the question for me to ask the clarifying, right? Because what your thing is
so go
that
ahead
I'm
and tell me what I asked you.
well, yeah, because you were asking. I was talking about God, and your whole concern is that I'm superimposing some notions on him, like the fact that he'd be all good, or that your notion of good is normative, right?
First, we
Those are,
started
I
out
think,
what
those are
good
fine.
was.
I think those are good concerns to have, and what I'm saying is, I get that. I'm not doing that. I'm actually asking the
I'm
person,
asking
right? Like
you.
I could put it in premises, and they could just reject the fucking premise or not. I'm not like
Oh my
forcing
gosh,
them to
bro.
accept it. So if you're not going to address that, then I don't really have any. There's nothing else to say to you.
Are you
I
trying
feel
to?
like
I
I've
think you're trying to
succinctly
bow
told you
out before
the
you
point.
even understand. You haven't straw man my question. So just tell me what
Straw
I
man your. You said I haven't straw manned your
feel,
question.
man. Don't be a jerk, bro. Just what is my question to you? Go ahead and repeat it.
I think you're backpedaling, honestly.
Can you just tell me what you think my question is?
Yeah, am I superimposing some notion onto God?
That was
Like,
my claim. It wasn't my question, bro.
yeah, and I told you why I'm not doing that. And you can either like accept
Yeah.
that,
So
or you can just be a douchebag and just be like, put your fingers in your ear and say, "Nah, you're not doing
can
that."
you
And like
repeat
that's
my
fine.
question?
You're just being dishonest. If I'm telling you, look, you can pull the cord off the bus stop, you don't have to accept. The argument wouldn't apply to you if you just don't accept those notions. I'm not forcing you to do it. I'm not going to tell you this 2 more times, right?
So I'm
It's
gonna go back
really
to my
easy. It's really
question.
easy to understand, right? This is
So,
how like an argument
oh
works.
wow.
If I give some argument or I make a claim and you're
So
like,
I
"Well, I
haven't
don't
even been
think
able to get
God
a
is all
statement
good,"
out.
then it
Oh,
doesn't apply to you. That's why I would ask the question. What you're saying
yeah.
is
So I'm
just
gonna try one
trivial.
more
It's
time.
honestly just wasting time. So do you have anything like relevant that you want to address? Like an
I'm gonna try one
objection?
more. I'm gonna try one more time. So you said something about God being all good. I asked you what that meant, and I'm waiting for an answer.
Again, I
What is
gave you
all
that.
good?
I told you either you can take a normative notion or not. And so then I explained that what that meant, right? If you don't understand, I can do it again. That's
I
fine.
asked you. I asked you to
But if you
approach
don't
this.
understand that the answer is that you don't have to take a
I
normative
hope
notion.
everyone notices that every time I open my mouth, J Mike cuts me off. I haven't even been able to complete a
Okay.
sentence. So I'll try
Well, go
one
ahead.
more time. So I'd ask that you approach this like a theologian, whereas you use a
Oh,
biblical proof text for your statement. So when you put forward the concept of all good, I'm going to ask you, how is that expressed in the Bible? So do you have the scriptures to point to that represents this
yeah.
notion of all good?
My claim, you're not understanding. So let me help you out. My claim is
It's a yes
not
or no.
forcing. Listen, this is
It's a
really
yes or
simple.
no.
Yeah, so the answer is that I don't think the interpretation of someone's scripture thinking that he's all good or not all good is dictated by the text itself. It doesn't say that itself. So if I cite you scripture,
What would be
listen,
superior
stop,
understanding?
stop. If I cite you scripture, it's going to
Where do we
assume
get the understanding from, though?
stop. Words do not interpret themselves.
Oh my
They can
gosh,
have
dude.
different meanings, which is why people disagree. So my claim, you're making a false claim that I'm not even making. I'm not just listen really carefully. It's really hard for you to do, and I've noticed that interacting with you, but try really hard right here. I'm not making the claim that a Christian ought to believe that God is all good or not, right? I am not making the claim that they should interpret the text one way or another. In fact, I make an argument that the text can be interpreted in a multitude of ways, which is a further issue for them. The point is to ask them if they accept that premise. And if they don't, the argument doesn't fucking apply to them. Now, I'm done addressing this point unless you have something relevant, because you're just making a trivial mistake. It's really stupid. And if anybody else wants to recapitulate what I'm saying to him or where I go wrong, just go ahead, because this is just not going to work. He's just going to do the same concrete thing he does where he doesn't know what he's talking about and not relevantly addressing what I'm saying. So
yeah, I'll do that. So J Mike is simply saying God is all good in most Christians' worldview. So he's just assuming that of the previous Christian. It may not apply to you, so it doesn't matter. He's not claiming the Bible says that.
Yeah, so what I said was you had put forward some premises that weren't borne out in the Bible. Lo and behold, asked you to provide a biblical
He never said they were put in the Bible. He
substantiation.
never said they were.
Lo and behold, I asked you to support it through biblical text. You
that's
have
not my
refused to
claim.
do
That's
so.
not never been my claim.
So
You're
it
just
just
you're not
shows,
understanding.
and,
So
and so lo and behold, my other claim that you're superimposing your notion of good on top of God also appears to be borne out because you have, as you said, no scriptural.
why are
Yep.
you just
What is
why are you just ignoring the fact that I'm saying that's not what I'm doing? Like what, like why are you just ignoring, like literally I'm asking, if I'm asking you a fucking question, did you go to the bank or not go to the bank? Am I telling you that you went to the fucking bank, Concrete? Is that really are you really that stupid? I'm sorry, but are you really that stupid? You cannot be that dumb. Right? If I'm asking you
Yeah,
a fucking
so
question, I'm not telling you you went there. right? I'm
I mean,
asking you.
I mean, concrete. If you need
So
something,
again,
if you need something biblical, just go Romans 12:2.
No, it's not
well,
the point.
you're
Like,
talking
look,
to J
I
Mike,
can
not
get in
me, right?
biblical
So
things,
the
but
whole
it's not.
point.
The point is whether it's premises that attack. It's the point is that it's tension between people that do accept these things. The reason why I cited it to that guy was because there was a whole prior point, right? There was something antecedent to that, which was the fact that he expressed that God was all good, right? And then I even asked if he took some normative notion there or not. I went through that. So it was relevant to things that he held to show tension there, right? Now, if you don't hold those points, then it wouldn't apply to you. And that's why I would
Yeah.
ask
So
you.
here's the one.
That's why you could just say I reject like premise 1 or 2 if I put it in some, if I formulated it in some way for you, because that's how premises work. They don't like force you to accept its truth value. If you don't, you're just making a trivial mistake.
He just fell off. I had a simple question for him. So the topic of the stage is convince us a God exists. Does anyone here think that you can convince us that a God exists by attacking a position that J. Mike holds? I'm
Probably
a bit
not.
confused.
No, I would say no. And I mean, I get that Concrete was basically asking a question, and then J. Mike was asking for clarification upon this because he doesn't know if what applies to Asline applies to Concrete, and then Concrete got really upset about that, started going to the Bible or essentially. I think it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Concrete was basically no true Scotsman Asline is what he was doing.
Well, I mean, yeah,
And
presumably he comes from some position where there is like the notion, and so that's probably like a huge hang up. But the problem is like if I give some argument and someone's like, "Well, I don't think God's all good," well, like, yay, the argument doesn't apply to you, right? So, like, I don't know why that's even has to be discussed.
So John Mumkay is a Christian, and he wants to convince us a God exists.
All right, I gotta go. We'll see
Yeah.
you guys later.